When I'm down here at my workbench doing my hobby thing, I like to have something on in the background. I may not even be actively listening, it's just nice to have something on related to the hobby. Maybe you're like that too, and isn't it annoying to have to get up and go click skip ad for the next video? There's 10 videos in this series, so here is one big, almost 3-hour supercut of all 10 episodes for your enjoyment. God knows which of you really could tolerate hearing my voice for 3 hours. This is it. Go big or go home. One of the most infamous modules in the history of Dungeons & Dragons, the Tomb of Horrors. One of my personal favorites, and I'm sure it holds a special place in the heart of many an old school DM. I've wanted to build it for a long time, so today we get started. I'm going to build the entrance hallway. Now I am doing these with my 1 1/4 inch grid approach and clip-on features for walls, low profile to allow for miniatures. So let's go ahead and take a look at the map. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. First up is the tile for the actual room. Now let's review the map. Here's the original, but today we're just going to look at room 3. It is 130 feet long and 20 feet wide, which means it's 26 spaces long and 4 spaces wide. So on a 1 1/4 inch grid, the overall tile needs to be 32.5 by 5 inches. Now 32.5 inches is a large tile, so I decided to break it into 2 sections, 15 inches and 17.5 inches. Chipboard for the bases. This is graphics medium chipboard. Link in the description below if you want to buy some in bulk. I love this stuff. However, these are 12 by 12 inch sheets, so I had to join 2 sections together just with some Scotch tape. And then foam board. This is the cheap stuff from Dollar Tree, but any foam board will work. You might just have to soak it in order to peel the paper off. So the foam board slab is a 1/2 inch narrower to allow for the walls on each side, and I just attached that to the chipboard with some white glue. Weighed it down with some books while it dried. Then with a cobblestone texture rolling pin, I pressed in a texture. This is subtle, but that's okay. I'm really just using this as a coloring guide for later on. Next up, I scored out the grid. Again, these are 1 1/4 inch spaces. First, lightly with a knife, and then chasing those lines with a ballpoint pen. Now this foam is very fragile, easy to chip, so this is normally where I would seal it with white PVA glue. However, Plaid recently sent me some Mod Podge and all the cool kids use it, so I figured, well, maybe I ought to give it a shot. And so I did. I mixed up some gray paint, also from Plaid, with a bit of Flow Aid and mostly Mod Podge. And then 2 thin coats of this concoction worked real well. It does have a different finish than white PVA glue. I know that question pops up occasionally. I can tell you from experience now, fingernail tests and everything, the finish of Mod Podge is smoother and more durable. Also, it doesn't reactivate when it gets wet, so it doesn't get sticky. Not relevant for this project, but if you were going to do a wash later on, it would be. So, Mod Podge, I finally get it. I'm on board. So now let's check back to the module and see what kind of details it has for the room. Room 3. Bright, brilliant colors are to be seen everywhere, the stones and pigments undimmed by the passage of decades. The floor is a corridor of colorful mosaic of stone with a distinct winding path of red tiles about 2 feet wide. The line snakes its way south down the corridor, easily visible to the onlooker. Okay, so this doesn't need to be like an insert feature, it can just be part of the tile. It's easily available to the onlooker, it doesn't need to be found. Also, I'm not going to be afraid of color, despite this being the Tomb of Horrors. This room has apparently very vibrant color, so I think the floor is going to be a lot of work, make it a nice feature. So it's just a matter of following that path on the tiles and painting those stones red. I painted them red, and then with a brighter, kind of orangey red, I painted half of each stone, sort of at a slant, and all of them in the same direction and on the same side, to sort of hint at the light coming in from the hallway outside. And I repeated that technique with the rest of the colors. I did a purple, blue, green, and a yellowish orange. This was painful. It took 2 hours. It was not fun, but it is done. And then for posterity, I applied one more thin coat of plain Mod Podge over top. Few hours to let it all get bone dry, and as expected, they are warped pretty bad. But I am unconcerned. I've dealt with this many times before on the channel, and my solution is the same now. Flip them over, paint a healthy coat of Mod Podge on the back, course, I used to use glue and that really contracts, but let's see how Mod Podge does 24 hours later. Flat. Wonderful. Now, as usual, the walls are a 1/4 inch thick, and I like to use double corrugated cardboard for that. Now, lacking any sort of drawing or art ability, like I can do architectural stuff, but I cannot draw to save my life. So let's look at what's going on with the wall. No stonework can be seen on the walls or the ceiling, for some sort of cement or plaster has been smoothed over those surfaces and then illustrated. The scenes painted show fields of kine grazing and blah 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 and a whole bunch of stuff. So I went to Google image search, found a decent ancient looking fresco, resized and desaturated it in Photoshop, and printed up a bunch of 3/4 inch wide strips. Print and paste is an awesome shortcut technique for very fine detail work that you're either incapable of or just don't want to do. Those I applied to the walls simply with glue stick, and then hot glued the wall onto the tile. Now notice which way the corrugation is going. The wall will be strongest this way. Also, by pressing down this single large piece that runs the whole length of the tile, it will help further eliminate any minor warp that's still going on, because it introduces a second axis of rigidity. Then I just ripped some 1/4 inch strips of cardstock and hot glued them to cover up all the corrugation. Finished basing them in black, and then with a kitchen sponge speckled on some dark gray, and then some light gray. Instant, decent looking stone texture. No washes or dry time needed. So these are the tiles. They came out great. I did consider doing a thin black wash over the entire ground, but ultimately decided not to risk it. The book does say that the colors are bright and brilliant, so I'm just going to let this be. Time to go construct the room features. First up, we're going to do the Misty Archway. Let's see what it says. If the character stands next to the entranceway, the base stones will glow yellow on the left, orange on the right, and the keystone glows blue. There's a misty veil across the archway, and nothing will cause the vapors to clear, nor will any sort of magic allow sight into the area until the glowing stones are pressed in the proper sequence. So I made this clip-on as per usual. It's 2 identical slabs of chipboard, sandwiching a slab of double corrugated cardboard, and then covering up the edge with some food box cardstock. The result is that 1/2 inch cavity at the bottom, which grabs onto the wall wherever you want to place it. I've done lots of videos on clip-on features in the past. I'll throw a playlist card on the screen in case you're interested. Anyway, I then cut up some chunks of chipboard and attached them with white glue. These are the stones that make up the archway itself. From there, I simply based with black, sponged on the stone texture like earlier. For the mist in the Misty Archway, I used polyfill. This is like $3 for a bag. I just attached a tuft of it with some white glue. But I forgot perhaps the most important feature, the glowing stones. Now normally I'd use my airbrush for this, but I know many of you out there probably don't have one, so just using a good old makeup brush, I swirled on a dark version of the color, and then a lighter version of the color, keeping the brush stabs more in the center of the stone, and finally kept to the very central portion with some plain white. The result, a decent looking glowing stone. Same principle for the orange and yellow ones. Okay, now I can glue on the mist, and that clip-on is done. Next up, the jackals. For this one, I lifted the artwork directly from the module, sized it down, printed it, and cut it out. I prepared a rectangular clip-on as per usual, gave it the stone treatment, and then attached the jackals to one side with plain old white glue. Again, print and paste. Now there's a trap here. The most outstanding feature of this area is actually outstanding. 2 jackal-headed human figures are painted so as to appear to be holding a real bronze chest. So there's the box. You can see it in the artwork. So I just took metallic craft paint. This is Folk Art Treasure Gold, again made by Plaid, and carefully painted that box. And this clip-on is done. Next to that is the metal door with the clawed hands. This area is where a torture chamber is painted, and the wall hiding this passage shows a painting of the iron door, which evidently confines some sort of horrid creature. Its taloned hands grasp at the bars. So I made this clip-on base the size of a typical door and decided to try and freehand paint the side with the feature. I used gunmetal to draw the bars and the rest of the door, some brown for the crossbar, and green and tan for the clawed fingers. The last clip-on is, of course, the iconic Green Devil. Now this next part, I thought I would try and use clay, experiment with a new medium. I've never used clay before, I've never sculpted anything before, I've never watched a YouTube channel about how to get started in sculpting before, and it went just about as good as you think it would. I tried, I really did. This Crayola air dry clay gets pretty good press. I tried to start with the basic geometries and then carefully shape things up, but it just was not good. So I jumped ship to a medium I understand, more foam board. But I can't draw faces, so back to the clay attempt, but maybe I can mix media and use some beads for the eyes, at least save me the hardest part of the face. But still, the rest of it was just an utter mess, and the more I tried to improve it, the worse it got. So then I was like, okay, foundation of the face with foam board, clay for minor features like the nose and the eyebrows, but I couldn't even figure that out. So final try, foam board for the overall face, beads for the eyes, and a blob of hot glue for the nose, which I shaped with the hot glue gun's nozzle while it was semi-cool and still pliable. For the horns, I tapped into my Warhammer 40k leftover Tyranid bits, chopped off the portion I needed, and hot glued it in place. At the end, I was actually somewhat satisfied with this, just good old-fashioned cobbling, no clay. So, I'm glad I bought this. Anyway, solid base coat with a good green paint, followed by a green wash. This is Army Painter Quick Shade Green Tone. I think Army Painter makes the best washes on the market. Personally, that's not a sponsored statement or anything. So a heavy wash with that, and then a dry brush with a lime green, followed up by a dry brush with yellow. The rest of the clip-on gets painted up as stone, just as everything else. All pits throughout the tomb are 10 feet deep, and at the bottom of each pit are 5 iron spikes coated with poison. Okay, so back to chipboard. This is a 2-inch square base so that it'll fit on any 2x2 game space area, wall adjacent or not. And then toothpicks for the spikes. The book says 5, so I cut out 5 and hot glued them on. Now this proved to be both pretty fragile and kind of boring looking. I'd like to throw on some corpses or bones or something, but I didn't have any, so I just took a bunch of different wood products, picks and sticks of different sizes, snapped them into rough pieces, and then I could put large blobs of hot glue at the base of each spike to make them much stronger, and at the same time laid down some random beads and just dropped this whole wood pile on there. Looks like a mess, and that's the idea. So once it cooled, I'm going to use these 3 shades. First, a rough base coat with the plain brown. Not going to bother with a second coat. Don't care if it looks splotchy. Then with the tan cinnamonish color, a heavy dry brush. And then another lighter dry brush with the cream color. Tied it all together with a black wash. This is just like 1 part black paint to 10 parts water. And the spikes simply get a metallic gunmetal and then some green on the tips to represent poison. So yeah, there's no match for this look like as described in the book. I just wanted some junk down there. So I will say I really like the look for different application. It's like busted up wood structure wherever there's ruins or something. Came out really nice and was easy to do. So I've inadvertently stumbled across something I want to use in a future project. Doesn't really fit here, but whatever. The players will not complain. Everything is all done. Let's put it on the table and give a little tour with everything set up. Pits in place as if they'd already been exposed, already been found by the player. This one was a bit of a challenge. They are bespoke tiles, which is different than my usual approach, right? Normally I'm all about the 2x2 form factor, but in this case, because of the nature of the ground and the uniqueness of the walls, I just figured it's going to be easier to make these as one large tile. We'll go on down the hallway, get a look at our intrepid party here. So I don't know, is this what's in your mind's eye? Would you read through the Tomb of Horrors? Can't say it was a fun project. Again, doing those stones was very painstaking. But I experimented with lots of different ways to cheat. I even tried using fruity pebbles mixed with white PVA glue, but ultimately, there's no substitute for our individual stones one by one. Now you should know, if this is your first exposure to crafting for tabletop gaming, there is a whole world of us out there. Go find us on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild. It's one of the many links in the video description below, a lot of resources there for you. And if you enjoyed this particular project, here's 2 more that you may want to check out. I think you'll enjoy them. So until then, I am Wylock, make things and play games, and I'll see you next time. It is the most iconic dungeon of all time. Its victims are countless and its cruelty boundless. Construction is well underway, and now it is only a matter of time until a Cyrarak's influence is released upon my basement. Hello everyone, Wylock here. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to continue our Tomb of Horrors build. The whole thing, no compromises. So this is part 2. In the first part, we did the entrance hallway, the real entrance that is, which is actually room 3. Today we're going to step back, take care of some odds and ends, some house cleaning, before we move on to the dungeon proper. Now, in the first episode, I was referring and reading out of the original, actually it's the facsimile of the original, but the original dungeon. I'm going to switch to referring to the 5th edition version from Tales of the Yawning Portal. Honestly, I don't think this matters structurally at all. Some of the mechanics are tweaked, but whatever. At least when I do cutaways like this, you'll be looking at something other than black and white text. And where appropriate, I will still pull in artwork from the original module because it's just so charming. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. I also need to make some aesthetic decisions right now that are going to affect the entire rest of the dungeon. Now, the original module had no description of what the interior generally looks like. And in fact, neither does the 5th edition version, but the 3rd edition version does. It talks about how, generally, unless otherwise noted, everything is of smooth granite, and doors are oak banded with iron. Let's talk doors. So there's doors throughout the dungeon, and as I go through, I'm not going to say how to build a door in every single episode. I'll do it once right now, and then I can just refer back to part 2 when I drop doors in future episodes. I previously did clip-on doors way back at the very beginning of my channel, chiseling popsicle sticks and painting them up, but that was 6 years ago, and it's kind of a pain to do, so I tried something new here. 2 methods. First method. Using these thin stirring sticks, chopped them up to the desired height of the door. I recommend about 50 millimeters. And I also held on to the rounded ends. Then ripping a strip of cardstock, pinning 5 of the sticks together, and binding them with that cardstock using hot glue, top and bottom. This is one side of the door, and it gets hot glued to a smaller rectangle of double corrugated cardboard. Once both sides are on, hot glue a strip of cardstock around the corrugation to cover it up, glue on some of those rounded ends where the door pull would be, and paint it up. Now, I've been doing wood the same way for 6 years now, color-wise, so I thought I'd try some other approaches, basing and dry brushing with different colors, doing washes, and I mean, it looked okay, considering that I can build and paint one start to finish in about 8 minutes. Is fine, but I wanted them to be a little bit special for this project. So I remembered this mold that I made several months ago, and I used some Smooth Cast 320 to make the doors. This stuff is awesome. It cures to a hard plastic in about 15 minutes and is quite paintable. After that, same approach really. Hot glued them to the center stock, covered up the corrugation. Now I got a nice 1/2 inch cavity at the bottom, which is what will grab onto the walls. Painted that up, and maybe it's not exactly what you'd call banded with iron, but whatever. I have wood and iron present, and they look good enough. So unless otherwise noted, all doors in the dungeon will look like this. Alright, so again, we did the real entrance, but we skipped the 2 false entrances, rooms 1 and 2, right? So let's read what they say and get to building those. The corridor before you is made of plain stone, roughly worked, and it is dark and full of cobwebs. The ceiling overhead is obscured by hanging strands of webbing. Also, information for the DM only, there is a collapsing ceiling trap, along with a pair of oaken doors at the end of the passageway, which are fake, and will activate that trap. Alright, so this room already is an exception to the aesthetic that is going to be the norm. Worked stone, mortared, so I'm going to keep that in mind. And I also think I want something to represent the falling rubble in the event that the ceiling does collapse and the trap is triggered. By the way, if you're brand new to me, I do use a 1 1/4 inch grid. It was the very first episode I ever made on this channel, making the case for it. It's a terrible video, it's really old, I didn't know what I was doing, but if you can suffer through it, you'll see why 1 1/4 inch grid is superior. And it is what I'm using for this entire build. Room 1 is 20 by 30 feet, so on a 1 1/4 inch grid, the total tile size needs to be 5 by 7.5. So I cut out what I call the tile foundation from chipboard. This is graphics medium chipboard. It's the stuff you find at the back of a legal pad, but I love it. I buy it in bulk, and you can too. There's links in the video description below. The walls, as always, are 3/4 inch high, so chipboard strips to start, and then some cheap white foam board. Peeled the paper from one side and textured it up. For speed, I chose to just use this texture rolling pin, again the same one I used in part 1, and then glued that to the chipboard, which in turn gets hot glued to the tile foundation. Now I'm double checking the interior dimensions so that I can cut out the foam for the floor, which gets textured in the same way. And then I apply the grid, just as in part 1, lightly scoring out the 1 1/4 inch grid and chasing the lines with a mechanical pencil or a ballpoint pen to widen the lines. Nice coat of pure matte Mod Podge to prime this foam. And then a black base coat, followed by a dark gray overbrush. This won't give full coverage, but that's fine. I'm really not too worried about this room. The players, if they even come across it, will probably only spend 3 minutes in here anyway. Then a dry brush with a light gray. And a subtle dry brush with white. Tying it all together with a black wash. This is just very watered down black acrylic paint. And the room description does include cobwebs, so my first inclination was to use some polyfill, dredge it in white PVA glue, and just stick it in some places along the wall. But, we can do better. I remembered the Duragar caravan I did a few months ago. I loved how that webbing came out, so I used it again here, just dropping hot glue straight into a tub of water randomly to make a flat, swirled up mess. Kinda looks like a cobweb, and hardens instantly thanks to the water. So I sliced up some pieces of that and hot glued them onto the tile, like this. If the trap is triggered and the ceiling collapses, I want some scatter rubble to show that. So I took this white expanded polystyrene, often found in packaging, and broke off some chunks. Hot glued them to some chipboard, and gave them a coat of Mod Podge for strength. Then some white glue and sand to flock the base, plus a few spots on the rocks themselves. Usual drill: black base coat, overbrush dark gray, dry brush light gray, and white. Wash with black. And I imagine that above the ceiling was earth, so just to get some color in this room too, I just nabbed these 2 scenic rubble tubs off the shelf and glued some into some random spots, just to break up the gray fest that's going on here. So that room is done. I just used 2 of the clip-on doors to show the false double doors. The webs look neat. Yeah, nice, I'm happy with this. Let's go check out room number 2. The corridor before you is made of plain stone, roughly worked and mortared with a 10-foot high ceiling. There are also 2 doors at the end of the passage, which are both false, and the sliding block trap. Aesthetically, this room appears to be the same as the first one, so I'm just going to reuse those same techniques. Construction here is identical to room 1, except that it's a longer room. Easy. And the only other thing I need here is the massive sliding block. So I hot glued some slabs of chipboard together to make a massive smooth block, and just painted it up with some different shades of gray just to make it a little bit distinct from the tile. It fits perfectly across the tile's interior width to demonstrate what's happened, as described in the book. And so with all of that done, let's get back on track and look at Room 7, the Forsaken Prison. This miserable cubicle appears to have absolutely no means of egress. 3 iron levers, each about 1 foot long, protrude from the south wall of the chamber. Alright, so here in the Forsaken Prison, I'm actually going to use the normal aesthetic, that granite that's going to appear throughout the rest of the dungeon. This is a 10 by 10 room, as simple as it gets. That means the overall tile is 2.5 inches square. But subtracting the widths of the walls, the foundation of the tile needs to be 2 inches. So here it is using double corrugated cardboard, and then I cut 3/4 inch wide strips of the same stuff and hot glued it around the outside. So you see why I had to reduce the size of the foundation, such that the overall tile ends up being 2.5 inches. Also hot glued on some corrugation cladding, which is my patented term for thin cardstock. Black base coat, and then my 2 main grays, dark gray and gray. First, the dark gray, applied by stippling on with a bit of kitchen sponge, aiming for about 50% coverage. And then the light gray, same thing but a little less pressure, aiming for maybe 25% coverage. The spaces themselves are 1 1/8 inch squares. This is so that we have a small gap in between the spaces. However, whenever a space is up against a wall, you need to chop away a little bit, and in this case we have 4 corner spaces, so all of them get trimmed down in both directions. Then I round off the corners, put a random chip in one of them, paint them up, and hot glue them in. For the levers in the wall, I'll make a clip-on feature. Start with a clip-on blank. Whenever I say clip-on blank, it simply means make a sandwich of 2 slabs of chipboard around double corrugated cardboard, and then cover the corrugation. So much like we did with the door a few minutes ago. For the levers, I punched holes, injected with hot glue, and stuck in some toothpicks. Easy enough. So that's room 7, and I ended up painting the levers with a copper color because the gunmetal was getting lost among all of that gray. Whatever. Now, if anyone was unfortunate enough to end up in room 7, the only way back is through this crawl space. Book says it's 3 feet wide, I'm just going to treat it as 5 feet, 1 miniature as it were. I need to think about how to execute this because it is a single wide hallway basically, and it goes underneath another room. I decided to do this straight 2D on chipboard, so I measured out my 1 1/4 inch grid and drew out the path per the map. It's long, so I did it over 2 pieces. At first I thought I would try an earthen sort of tunnel, like it had been dug out. At least it would give some color variety, but it didn't turn out very good. And besides, this is an engineered crawl space, so it should probably be stone. So I re-blacked it and started over. Solid dark gray, and then I made a stamp. This is an old DM Scotty trick. So this is foam board, peeled the paper from one side, carved in my pattern, including the grid, and hot glued it to some double corrugated for strength. Then I put a healthy coat of a light gray on there and quickly stamped it out. So that did the trick, and in fact, this looks kind of cool, almost like a cel-shaded style. I don't know, I'm going to keep this on my notepad to explore it in a different project, but this effect ended up really interesting looking. So anyway, I drew on the path of the tunnel and blacked out the exterior. As expected, these are pretty warped due to all that paint, and the answer is simple: butter the back. So I painted it black on the other side, and about 2 to 3 hours later, voila, perfectly flat. I like this. It's something different, makes it stand out amongst all the other gray of the dungeon. Next up, we'll knock out this little hallway that connects the entrance to room 8. Technique here is identical to what we did for room 7. So this is 10 by 20, which means the tile is 2.5 by 5 inches. Reducing for wall space, I made it 2 by 4 3/4. It's assembled and painted up in the same way, and the idea is that the end without a wall connects to the door from room 3, and the wall at the far end provides the door for the players to encounter that's going to take them to room 8. What appeared to be a statue an instant ago comes to life before your eyes. The creature flaps its wings and stares at you. Alright, now room-wise, there doesn't appear to be anything special about this. It's just a room, the gargoyle is the feature, so it should be pretty easy to do. This room is 20 by 30 with a short 10-foot corridor to the east. Because that door already exists on the small hallway we built earlier, I'm going to have no wall there. The construction technique is identical to that for room 7 that we did a few minutes ago, using double corrugated cardboard and hot gluing walls to the side of the foundation, and reducing the foundation based on where the walls are going to be to make sure we preserve the underlying grid. For the spaces, I did reach a point where I thought to myself, why am I doing it this way? Is there a way to do this en masse? I mean, that's going to become important, especially when I get to room 25 later on. Oh god, so many freaking squares. So instead I glued them on raw and tried to paint them in place. And it went almost perfectly. The only downside is that the space edges are hard to get to, and you can see some of them still have some raw spots poking through. So maybe going forward I still have to base them in black one by hand, but then I can do all the sponging with them installed on the tile. Still a huge time savings. As for the gargoyle itself, it is a mutated gargoyle, a modified version of the standard stat block from the monster manual, but honestly these are supposed to be high-level characters, so I'm going to make a large 2-inch based miniature instead of a medium 1-inch one. Whatever. So I look at my leftover Warhammer bits. I found this old pewter body. It had been thrown in with a used army that I bought some time ago, and I have a bunch of other leftover Tyranid bits, so I just used those and cobbled together this creature. Superglue accelerant is a must. Instant, extremely strong bond. For the wings, I used plastic-coated paper clips as an armature, cardstock for the skin, and just hot glued that on. And then lined it with hot glue to strengthen everything up and add some ribs, also some leftover spikes from a trigon at the points. Outside for spray primer, and then a base coat with a gray. I was thinking this gargoyle is either going to have a green or purple undertone, and then I remembered how when I painted Demogorgon a couple weeks ago, I really like how that purple stone came out. So I'm going to go with what I know. Army Painter purple wash, all over it, give it an hour to dry, and it's still not quite there. So I lightly dry brushed with some light gray, and then hit it with a black wash, Army Painter dark tone. This gave me the result I was looking for. It is a stone gargoyle, but with hints and undertones of purple. So that was a fun little kit bash. It looks okay for 15 minutes of work. It was the most fun 15 minutes I had making this video. So we're going to linger on it for a little bit, just cuz. I always do something with the base, even if it's as simple as sand. I don't care if they look out of place as a result. And now let's go look at the story so far. Yeah, I'm eventually going to need a bigger table. Sorry for the poor lighting conditions here, it's hard to illuminate such a large area. So the first false entrance, easy enough. They walk up, the trap is sprung, the block moves over and fits in. Revolutionary stuff. It was the 70s. And the other false entrance. If placed correctly, these two would be much further away from room 3 than they are, but my table's just not wide enough. And honestly, after the players find the true entrance, there's no reason to have these tiles on the table anymore anyways, so whatever. Let's stroll on down the main entrance, and as you can see, this assumes the players have already found or tripped all 6 of the pit traps, the last of which connects to that crawl space. Now the main reason I went 2D with this is so that the tile for room 13, when I eventually get to it, can just be set on top of it, and we can accurately reproduce the map on the table. I must say, I was dreading this whole project at first, but now that I've started and got some momentum, I really don't want to stop. The prospect of the entire dungeon is really exciting to me now. Backing up, through the painted plaster door, the short connecting hallway, and into the gargoyle's lair. It is my intent to build every asset, everything needed to run this dungeon without compromise, and that includes the monsters. And it'll all fit in a good-sized cardboard box because it's 2.5D, so I can travel with it, bring it to conventions, etc. Alright, I think that's enough for one night. I'm so glad that you're taking this journey with me. Part 3, next time we're going to do the Secret Door Complex, followed by Room 10, the Hall of Spheres. And if this whole concept of crafting for your tabletop gaming is new to you, you should know that I am not alone. There's a group of 33,000 strong and growing. Find us on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild. There's a link in the video description below, plus links for a whole bunch of other resources that will help you out. If you like this particular video today, then here's 2 more that I think you'll really like. And until I see you next time, I'm Wylock. Make things and play games. In this episode, I'm going to make a boatload of clip-ons, a really cool looking dance floor, another gargoyle, and I'm going to revisit some progress that I've already made. Because hey, I'm not applying Six Sigma here. Although, that would make for riveting content. Applying Six Sigma to your D&D crafting. Where's my notebook? Hey everyone, Wylock here. Thanks for joining me. Part 3. Today we continue our journey to build the entire Tomb of Horrors. Not a lot of preamble, I'll just say, I assume you've watched previous parts, and I'll always make that assumption. So I'm not going to revisit like how I build tiles and how I paint them. I've showed that already, and I should be able to just say, here's a room that I built. Only the new elements are what I'll dive into detail on. So without further ado, let's dive in. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. We left off in room 8 with the gargoyle, so let's go to the text and check out room 9. The small room beyond the door is empty and appears to have no other exits. So this is just a cluster of small rooms connected by a whole bunch of doors, and some shenanigans going on with a bolt trap that doesn't need to be modeled. Okay, a lot of grunt work to be done here with these many small rooms and secret doors, but I am not going to abstract it. I committed to do this thing, no compromise, as drawn, as written. What else can I say? Rip and tear until it is done. First up, good old-fashioned 45-minute blitz to get all these tiles built and painted. And then for all those secret doors, here's how I've decided to handle them. I make a standalone small clip, the body of which is only a 1/4 inch tall. So this is a standard clip-on blank, except it's just really, really small. And then the slab of wall that has moved out of the way is just some double corrugated cardboard hot glued on there. Notice the corrugation is running up and down. That allows the hot glue to really seep into the bottom and make this a very strong connection. I know it doesn't look like it, but it really is. Here it is done, painted up, and you can see it is built to withstand some manhandling, right? It is very durable. I'm going to clip it on here, and I can actually hold up the tile by the secret door. Cool. One other consideration for building the tiles. Now I had to account for the fact that the party could be coming from either direction. It technically is possible to come through room 10 first and then into this series of secret rooms. So I prepared for the worst case scenario. First, the inner cluster of 4 rooms. Let's assume that the outer rim hasn't been discovered yet. So I built the tiles with walls such that those could be discovered independently. Then I took those away and assumed that the players were coming from room 8. So I designed and built enough tiles of the right shape with the right walls to wrap all the way around and get to room 10. Then I imagined that they were coming from room 10 to room 8. So I rearranged those tiles, and it turns out I only needed 1 extra hallway in order to be prepared for this scenario. So I'm ready for any combination of those cases. They can all be built independently. And in fact, here they are. And this again demonstrates the power of the 1 1/4 inch grid. You can fit a 1 inch miniature on any of those game spaces. The grid is preserved and not offset. So now let's move on to something a little more fun. Right, now the room I've been waiting for. Number 10, the Great Hall of Spheres. This area is similar to Area 3, for the floor is of inlaid tiles. Similar to room 3, inlaid stones. I don't want to do this again. This took like 3 hours, and in the grand scheme of things, as crafting goes, that's not a long time, but it was so tedious and I hate it, and the reward is so... There's got to be a better way. I decided to go print and paste. So there's a really cool site that I go to a lot called Genetica, I don't know how it's pronounced, but it has tons of free textures you can download for your personal use. So I found a cool one, brought it into Photoshop, duplicated it, rotated it randomly, messed with the hue, and gave it a bevel and emboss. So this I printed up, and applied with glue stick. 5 minutes, and it looks great. At the south end of the room is this magic archway. As you come close, 3 stones in the archway in front of you begin to glow. The left-hand base stone shines with an olive hue, the one on the right with citron, I don't know how to pronounce that, and the keystone 7 feet overhead gives off russet light. Those are random color choices. This misty archway is identical to the one from room 3, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. Only difference is the colors, the olive, citron, and russet. And I do spritz the polyfill pretty heavily with flat sealant to really crisp it up, keep it in place, make it durable, and make it cuttable. Not a whole lot more to say about that. I needed to build it, I built it, and it's done. So the book talks about these vibrant, colorful paintings of humanoid figures interacting with the colored spheres up on all the walls, covering all the walls. Now, I don't know how to draw. I don't really want to hit Google image search for this. So what did I do? Magic the Gathering cards. Yes, perfect. And it's pretty much the right scale, too. So I'm not burning uncommons or rares. These are just commons. I just cut out the artwork, and I tried to pick pieces of art that showed it almost the full body, as opposed to a close-up. So I cut those out and simply glued them to a clip-on blank. Hand-painted all the spheres with my acrylic craft paints, according to the description in the book. And I also tried to pick art where it looks like a hand was open or they're interacting with something, and I would paint the sphere there. I also hit these with some flat crystal clear sealant to kill that nasty gloss and also seal down that acrylic craft paint. Those dots will scrape right off. So here's a bunch of them clipped on, not in the correct order, but just here for demonstration. One thing I learned later on, don't hot glue the magic cards to cardboard. They're very slick and they'll pop off. Use white PVA glue. So it was about 45 minutes start to finish to make all 20 of those clip-ons. Alright, so those came out pretty sweet. I'm really happy with those. Next, you know, I was never happy with the walls of these. The book talks about colorful paintings up on the wall of various scenes, and I did this black and white pattern that repeats itself. I think I've stumbled upon a way to make that better, and it's easy to retrofit, so yeah, I'm going to go ahead and revisit that for room 3. So yeah, again, I just picked some evocative art that might be on the walls of a Tomb of Horrors, and attached them over top the existing wall just using some glue stick. Yeah, that is much more colorful. I think it's much truer to what the book is talking about. Looks a little bit eclectic, but I mean, it's better than it was before, so I'm happy. Nice. All right, that feels so much better. Now, where were we? Room 10. So now if the Anubis things holding the box are in black and white, that doesn't make sense because the walls are vibrant in color, so I decided to go ahead and revisit this as well. Sort of consulting the 5th edition imagery to get a basic idea for what colors I'm going to go after. And then I imported the original artwork to Photoshop and just did some colorization there. Printed it out and glued it onto a clip-on blank, just like the first one. Some of you noted that the brass box does protrude from the wall, so this is an opportunity to do a little something extra. I just made a ledge and a box out of some bits of chipboard, stuck on some gems, again kind of referring to the 5th edition artwork, and painted it up bronze, followed by a soft tone wash. So here's the before, and here's the after. Okay, done. Now, room 10. I was never really happy with the green devil face either. You recall I had a really hard time making it. Well, I stumbled across something after breakfast the other day. Look at the top half of this egg carton. Kind of looks like mouths. So I'm going to extract them. And this is a very cheap, fragile paper pulp. So I'm going to slather it with a nice coat of Mod Podge to harden it up. And I'm doing this on my new Surebonder silicone mat. Love this thing, saved my cutting mat. And then I really like this image back from the original module artwork with that large gold copper wall behind it and that radiating pattern or whatever. So I made a much larger clip-on blank for this one. I cut out some holes for the eyes and hot glued in some beads behind it. And again, the nose I sculpted out of hot glue just like the original try. And for that pattern on the wall, I'm going to use food box cardstock. I just measured out the shapes and cut them out with an X-Acto knife. That I attached with glue stick, and then hot glued on the face. The large open areas at the top and bottom I just covered with some cardstock. At this point, just for good measure, another nice layer of Mod Podge over everything, including those horns which haven't been primed yet. While I was at it, I made the 2 other heads that are going to appear in room 25 much later on, but while I'm doing this with the egg carton, it's useful to production line things. I'll set those aside, we'll see them in a future video. And from there I painted it up pretty much as I did the first time. On the wall it's a metallic gold, then a shade, then a dry brush. So here's the before, and here is the after. So here is room 3 revisited, and isn't it so much cooler looking? Here it was at the end of part 1, and here it is now in part 3. Actually, now I'm kind of looking at the floors. You know, I must say, I like how this looks so much that it makes me wonder if I should revisit my tile for room 3. Okay, no more going backwards. Let's go look at the northwest corner of room 10. This small room holds what appears to be a statue of a gargoyle 8 feet tall with 4 arms. One of the arms is broken off and lies on the floor in front of the statue. And it looks like it's connected to room 10 via a crawlway. It's like a very small tunnel. For these crawlways, I'm treating them differently than like hidden passages, like the crawl space that we had in part 2. So these are going to be, I think, naturally earthen dug tunnels, just based on the way they're drawn on the map with the squiggly lines and all. It also just gives some aesthetic variety to everything on the table. So the standard I had committed to is my 1 space wide hallways would be on just 2D chipboard. So that's what I'm using. First I measure out my 1 1/4 inch grid, pencil on where I know the path is going to go just to help me visualize it. And to paint, it's 2 coats of French vanilla to give a nice solid base coat. And then with a cinnamon type of color or sienna, kind of side strike at it to create streaks, which sort of hint at where the pathway is going. And then that exact same technique, but with a dark brown. Actually, it's not a browny brown. It's like a walnut, very desaturated sort of dark brown. And then lastly, with a very rich, chocolatey bark, I think this is called bark brown, watered it down a lot to a wash and applied that. This will return some nice color, some nice saturation. And from there, I just freehanded blacked out the edges, or the walls. So that leads into this little 10 by 20 room. Pretty easy to do. Only difference with this one is I needed to leave a gap in the wall that's 1 inch, where that crawlway ends and meets up with it. For the gargoyle, well, I already built one of these for room 8. I don't have that exact body again, but I can make something that looks kind of close. So that's what I did, back to my leftover Tyranid bits, and kit bashed it together. This one actually came out, I like it a lot better. I actually put horns on the head. I think that's important for a gargoyle look. And then the way those legs double back, I forget what that's called, that double jointed knees or whatever, just makes it a little truer to the source artwork. And you can see the broken off arm is lying there on the ground in front of it. Let us look at the entire dungeon so far with everything we've built, except for the 2 false entrances. I don't really feel the need to show those anymore. Quick note about room 10, it's a huge tile, so I split it in 2, and this one is actually 2 equal halves, and what that does is splits it in the middle of a 10-foot space so that I could use clip-ons there because I knew there were going to be some to hold them together. Also, this crawlway that goes underneath the room, well, it literally goes underneath the room because, again, I did those on 2D chipboard. Completely unnecessary, but so is all of this. I don't know why I'm doing this, because it's fun, I suppose. And I've really been researching and practicing with my DSLR camera here, so hopefully you guys have noticed a difference lately, trying to bring in much more beautiful video quality. Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again, when something is beyond your artistic reach, print and paste is an awesome way to go. And coming up here down the line is a couple of false doors. They're actually trapped, just using my normal doors that I covered in part 2. I know that what you're looking at, this style is not for everyone. It's not gritty or dusty or grimy at all. Totally get that. But lately I've just been really interested in color. What can I say? It's my terrain. And we'll get another close-up look at the gargoyle here. By the way, I've since looked it up, and the correct term for those legs is digitigrade, or it might be ungulligrade. It's one of those two. Man, I am tempted to redo the gargoyle in room 8. I'm really worried I'm going to do it. There is this winding crawlway that leads to room 14, and there's another crawlway that I haven't made yet, so you don't see it. Another quick look at room 9, and I say good riddance to thee. That was not necessarily fun to make, but here it is, rendered accurately. And while we're at it, one final look at room 3, following its makeover. You know, I might end up applying a brown wash to those walls just to dull them down a bit, make it more ancient, without losing the color and the wonder of it. But yeah, the single most exciting thing for me out of this session was the egg carton for the green devil face. Well, this has been a very productive couple of nights here. This project's coming along nicely. I hope you're enjoying the series. I'm trying to present the project as it unfolds, so that means warts and all, and if I go backwards, I go backwards. Just basically documenting everything that I'm doing as opposed to doing a tutorial. And let's be honest, I'm probably going to go back and revisit the gargoyle in room 8. As always, tons of resources in the video description below, especially if you're new to this whole thing. And if you're not a member of the Tabletop Crafters Guild on Facebook, I do hope that you'll come check us out and join us. But until then, if you're enjoying this series, then here's 2 more videos that I think you'll like. Until I see you next time, I'm Wylock. Make things and play games. Oh, we're starting to get close. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Multiple rapid-fire mini projects today in part 4 of my Tomb of Horrors build. All crafting, pure focus. Hey everyone, Wylock here. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to part 4 of my complete Tomb of Horrors build. Today we only have 2 rooms on deck, but they're both pretty densely packed with lots of features, lots of mini projects to get through. So let's hop over to the table and get started. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. So we've come to the end of a crawlway from room 10. The floor goes out or something like that. It's explained in the text. But then you get dumped into this room, room 13, the chamber of 3 chests. 3 large chests are affixed firmly to the floor. One of them is gold, and in there there's a swarm of poisonous snakes. One is silver, with a trap that doesn't need to be modeled. And the last one is oak, that causes a giant skeleton to teleport in. Let's start with the wooden chest. Pretty simple. I took one of those jumbo-sized popsicle sticks and cut off the 2 ends, and then some of these small flat wooden picks. I think toothpicks would work too, but whatever. Small wood bits, and just hot glue those around to form the outside. I also hot glued in a glass bead to add some weight. And the text also says it is bound with thick bronze bands, so I'm just going to hot glue on some strips of cardstock and paint those up accordingly. Now in the appendix it says that this giant skeleton is huge, but even just looking at the map, there wouldn't be room for a 3x3 square creature in here. So I'm making an executive call. I'm going to put this on a 2-inch base and make it a large miniature. This is simply a 3D printed miniature that I bought from Fat Dragon Games and then scaled up and mounted to a 2-inch base. Not going to dive deep here on painting miniatures. This was real simple. Block in colors and then washes. The 2 metal chests, I used double corrugated cardboard. Just cut some small bits, hot glued 2 of them together, and clad the outside with cardstock. Also attached a slab of chipboard to the top for interest, and a bit from my leftover costume jewelry drawer to form a clasp. And then just paint it up, 1 gold, 1 silver. Easy enough. Alright, let's see what's next. Oh no. Oh no. Do not do this. Do not do it. It's unnecessary. Do not bejewel them. Do not bejewel them. Do not bejewel them. They don't need gemstones. They're perfectly fine. They don't need gemstones just because it's fantasy scatter terrain. Stop. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah, some of us have a tendency to bejewel things just because they're fantasy. These look fine as is. Maybe they should be simpler. Let everything else be the statement in the room. Sometimes more is less, and despite the fact that these just look like candy and they're just so fun to put on and they make everything sparkle and be colorful, they're just not always necessary. So I resolved that I'm not gonna do that for these. I don't need to bejewel them. That said, I did go ahead and bejewel them because gemstones are freaking awesome, and why wouldn't you use them? So last is that swarm of poisonous snakes that comes out of the gold chest. I used vinyl coated paper clips. Just bent a whole bunch of them into snake-like shapes, super glued them to a 1-inch base in a tangled manner, and then I cut some little diamonds of cardstock and hot glued those to the end. These are like the head of the asp, if you will. It looks silly up close, but from like 2 feet away or further, it looks like a tangle of snakes. The snakes just get primed and then painted up with like a cayman green and then a light green for the heads. No washes or highlighting, not really concerned about that. This will be fine from 2 feet away. Also, the tunnel that goes from room 7 to room 3 has a plug in its ceiling, which is this room's floor. So for that, I just cut 2 circles of chipboard, and I painted one to look like the tunnel below, and then the other to look like the granite floor, and hot glued it on so it looks like that plug was like picked up and moved out of the way. So if the players come in that way, or otherwise find that secret door, I can just drop this in. So that's room 13. Room 14, the Chapel of Evil. There's a whole lot going on in here. I love this room, and it could easily be tricked up by adding some combat. On that note, people sometimes, complain or at least point out that this module isn't focused on combat. It's about player knowledge as opposed to character knowledge and ability to solve puzzles and stuff, but you could easily spruce this up. It's basically a blank slate. You could absolutely add monsters in anywhere you want. And this room in particular has a lot of opportunity. You see what is obviously some form of temple area. There's paintings on the wall, etc., and there's a mosaic path leading between 4 rows of wooden pews that face the worship area. In front of those is a wooden railing, and in front of that is an altar in front of a tiered dais upon which there is a wooden chair. Now what about that mosaic path? Why isn't it in the tile, right? I did that like for room 3 and room 10. Well, the answer is these are a lot of work to make, these being these halves. I mean, look at that. Can't even manage these. It's a huge room, it's a square, and it's got walls on all 4 sides. So I could use this in the future for like a big showdown, put any kind of scatter terrain on it. So I may want to use this outside of the Tomb of Horrors. Therefore, it would be silly to hard code its purpose just for putting that mosaic tile down. So instead of making it integral to the spaces, we're going to make a drop-in or an overlay piece, whatever you want to call it. And in fact, I reused that exact same Photoshop that I did for room 10. And I used glue stick to attach it to chipboard so I wouldn't get too much warping, and cut them out. Piece of cake, so they drop right in. The dais, or maybe it's pronounced dais. I'm sure someone will let me know. But anyway, that's just an arch. So quick tip, if you ever want to cut something like an arch that's perfectly symmetric, freehand draw 1/2 of it, trace it, flip it over, and trace it again. That ensures that it's going to be mirror symmetric. A lot easier than trying to freehand a true even curve. Anyway, these are just 2 slabs of double corrugated cardboard, and I glued those together, covered the corrugation, and painted them up with the, I guess I'll call it the alternate gray scheme for this dungeon that I've been using. The wooden pews were pretty easy. I just took some Jenga blocks. Actually, this is a dollar store knockoff version of Jenga, and hot glued on some jumbo popsicle sticks, clipped some corners, and painted it up like wood. And of course, a happy little gem. 8 of those, done and done. The railings also kept this pretty simple because they're railings. Jumbo popsicle sticks for their base, had to hot glue a couple together to make it long enough. wooden dowels for the actual railing, the posts, and then coffee stirrer on top. Alright, what else is in the room? The chair is nicely carved and padded, but seems unremarkable. Well, in my last video I made a chair, and it's kind of remarkable, but if this has no mechanical purpose, I'm just going to use it, so I'm not making a new one. Boom, chair. And then on each side of the dais are large brass candelabras, each holding 5 white candles, and then some white urns in the corners. Okay, urns first, because those are really easy. Just these common wooden bits you find at the craft store, and glue on a bead, prime it, paint it up to match. White urn with a brass stopper. The candelabra is much more fun. This is a modular like pipe straw toy that I found on Amazon. Actually, a lot of people use it on these crafting channels. So I cut one in half and then hot glued it to a 1-inch base along with a wooden dowel in the middle there. That's going to be the main post. And then I punched out some chipboard circles with a hole punch, 5 of them to be exact. And then I'm going to use hot glue on a toothpick. This is the typical DM Scotty method for candles. Just leave the last few millimeters of the tip there uncoated, chop it off, and then hot glue it onto those platters or whatever they are. Vinyl coated paper clip. I unbent it, and then lately, again, I've been obsessed with this gel control super glue and accelerant. So I used that old trick to get a nice instant hard connection there. Yep, love that. It does saturate the chipboard a bit, but if you let it dry, it's no problem. And I attach those to the main post in the same way. Here it is before priming, and here it is afterwards. I used my airbrush to apply a nice smooth coat of bronze, and then wash it with some Army Painter Soft Tone to give it character. Paint up the candles with a beige, and then yellow and orange at the tips. And here it is all done. It is much stronger than it looks. I accidentally dropped it once or twice. Sprawled on the floor near the west wall is a skeleton who is sort of pointing towards an archway in the wall that's filled with an opaque, bright orange vapor. The archway. I'm so freaking tired of making these. I made it exactly as I did the first two, so I'm not going to revisit that. The only difference here is none of the stones are glowing. The mist is glowing though, so after giving it the sealant to crisp it up, I airbrushed it with a bright orange. The skeleton on the ground is just a miniature that I already had. I think it was 3D printed, so I cut off its base and just laid it down there. So there he is on the ground, pointing to the archway. And that brings us finally to the altar. The centerpiece of this chapel is a block of strange material that glows with an inner light of opalescent blue. If it's touched, then it triggers a lightning bolt, and then it starts to glow with a fiery blue red. And then there's a second stage to the trap. I'm going to use this hard plastic. It's about 1 millimeter thick. I bought it online. It's different than packaging, like from a product. That's really flimsy stuff. You could use that. You could get away with it, but I had this lying around from another project, so I chopped up the rectangles that I needed to put a box together, and then put the box together with thin beads of hot glue on a low temperature. And then I used this stained glass paint, also from the other project that's forthcoming. Works really well. I had some dust on there, and you can see it actually created some cool texture, but you want to make sure that the surface is clean before you use that stuff. I'm going to stuff this with polyfill to make it look opalescent, sort of cloud it a little bit, and then I'm putting together a circuit with 2 red LEDs. I've done circuits a lot in the past. I'll throw a card on the screen in case you want to look at the basics. I'm not going to revisit it all here. The foundation is just double corrugated cardboard with the corrugation covered up, and then I excavated some of it out of the bottom to have room for the circuit. And here we are testing it. It's not pretty, but it doesn't need to be. Good to go. And then I painted that up with the alternate stone colors that I've been using. And then the box just gets glued on top of that. So here it is. And in this particular rotation here, it doesn't really show up. I mean, that doesn't look like much at all. But on the table, the red light really does show up when the trap goes off. So here's the story so far. Let's go down to room 10 and then take the secret passageway over to room 13. This is where the 3 chests are, as well as that plug to the passageway underneath. We'll just pan around here for a moment and take a look. And once again, with the 1¼ inch grid and no wall offsets, this can be built exactly as drawn in the map. So it's placed on top of that passageway from room 3, exactly as drawn. And now from above, let's go back to room 10 and make our way over to room 14 through that secret passageway. And our intrepid party is in here. They're about to get to the secret door. And the first thing they see is that mosaic pathway, which drops in quite nicely. Sometimes you get lucky. I think I'm going to get a lot of mileage out of this particular photoshopped tile set. Print and paste is becoming more and more attractive to me, honestly. I thought about putting padding on the wooden pews to match the chair in the front, but I never know if I want to use these in some other temple, so wood, just plain wood, looks good in good or evil or whatever color scheme. I just left it as is. Orange Mist, the Cheetos archway, if you will. Crazy stuff happens if you walk through that. Railings, kind of large. I've never really cared much about scale though. And then that chair from the video I did last week. Now someone did comment, oh, are you going to use that in Tomb of Horrors? I said yes. They said, awesome, it'll make a great throne for the throne room. And I realized, yeah, there is a throne room later on. So I'll use it for that and I'll come back and make a new chair for this room. So the non-mechanical stuff in this room, the urns, the candelabras, the chair, that's where I think it's rife to introduce your homebrewed ideas. If you're going to go to the trouble of making this stuff, homebrew something to go with it and make the terrain matter. Alright, coming along nicely. Again, if this whole thing is exciting to you, you should check out the Tabletop Crafters Guild on Facebook. Huge group, 33,000 members strong and growing. And if you liked today's video, of course you're going to enjoy the other parts in the series, but here's 2 other videos that I think you'll also enjoy. So till I see you next time, I'm Wylock, make things and play games. How to YouTube. Step 1. Do a cold open stating what the video is about, giving the audience the exact same information they already had by reading the title of the video. In this video, I will continue my Tomb of Horrors build. Step 9. Upload with frequency and do not disappear for 6 weeks at a time. Hello everyone, Wylock here. Thanks for joining me today. Got a bunch of different tips and tricks and micro projects to bring at you as we delve further into the Tomb of Horrors. As always, this video presupposes that you've seen the previous 4, so I won't retread covered ground. Step 12. When you're done kicking off, shove something in front of the camera, which could be your face. Alright. Here we go! And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. We last left off in room 14. There's a secret block in the east wall and a whole bunch of verbiage to talk about it, but honestly, it's not worth my time. It's a secret passageway, so I just made another one of those 2D crawl spaces. Beyond that, the corridor widens to 10 feet and turns southward, where steps lead steeply downward to a corridor that goes west. Now steps. Long time ago I did stairs on this channel and showed how I would make inserts for my tiles, but in hindsight I don't think they were the best approach. So I tried something new here. To make an insert illustrating steps, I took chipboard rectangles and then painted them up exactly as my dungeon. So solid black base coat, sponge on a good layer of dark gray, and then lightly sponge on a layer of light gray. The difference is I also sponged on a very subtle amount of white. The reason why will be clear in a moment. Then I marked off my steps. I think I did 3/8 of an inch or something like that. Just some subtle pencil marks. And then with some cardstock as a mask, I used pure black in my airbrush and created some gradients. So this imagines that the light is at the top of the hallway going down, catching the lip of each tread and not illuminating that inner corner. Once all those are done, just sort of freehand, I did some triangular shadows. So it's narrowest at the bottom and there's no shadow at the top. So it's like 2 triangular areas on each side. Yeah, that illustrates, and it's a 2D way to sort of hint at stairs without having to actually make 3D tiles. Oh, and this is why I speckled on some white. Airbrushing black really dulled everything down, even the spots I didn't intend to hit. So starting with a bolder contrast, let the overall stone look match my tiles in the end. Alright, so back to the map. This hallway goes west, and then long story short, there are 3 doors in a row, each with a pit trap after them. Now the module says that all the pit traps in the dungeon are the same. They have 5 iron spikes that are poisoned. You might recall that I made the first 6 pit traps for the entrance hallway back in the first episode of this series. But looking back, I'm not quite happy with them, so it's time to revisit. So a 2-inch square of chipboard, then a thin frame of chipboard about a 1/4 inch wide glued around the perimeter. Then I poked holes in the bottom with an awl and inserted toothpick tips and glued them in place. Hot glue worked, but I did eventually switch to white glue. So super easy, but a little more modular. They look like they would fit in place in any sort of dungeon that I'm likely to come up with, as compared to the old traps which were filled with rubble. Now on that note, I'm going to do something while we're here. Here's one of those old pit traps. I'm going to tear the spikes out, and then with some kitchen shears, cut this square into just sort of a rough shape. And now, it's rubble scatter terrain. Perfect, no extra work needed. And that's going to come in handy later on at the end of this video. Step 18. Add brief digital close-ups during pauses, as this suggests that this is an edgy presentation and will instruct the audience to realize that this is a humorous moment. Step 19. Ask a completely banal question that you don't actually care to hear the answer to, but ask the audience to leave a comment below in order to drive metrics. So you guys like these new pit traps, or you like the old pit traps? Leave a comment! Moving on up, this hallway runs unnecessarily long northward, and it ends at a locked oaken door. And there's some details that have nothing to do with modeling. And what else do we see here? As the door falls away, blah blah blah, the walls of the passage ahead of you are of smooth white alabaster, and the floor is highly polished smoke gray marble. So the foundation of this tile was built like any other hallway tile. I just didn't put the squares down. Then I primed it with a light gray, and I tried to mix some pearlizing medium with white to try and get that alabaster look. For the floor, I went to simple print and paste, because I thought, this'll pop nicely. It contrasts with the rest of the hallways. It'll look nice on the table. Doesn't need to have a grid, whatever. And those walls did not come out good at all. So I also got some textures for that and print and pasted those. Then there's a whole lot more needless detail about how to run this trap, but basically it ends at a lava pit. So for this lava pit, I cut the foundation out of double corrugated cardboard as usual. For the walls, I imagined them as a natural cave area. So I took aluminum foil, rolled it up into sticks that are about a 1/4 inch wide, and hot glued those around the perimeter. So a stack of 2 of them gave me a height of 3/4 of an inch, just like all the other tiles. Then I crinkled up and decrinkled another sheet of aluminum foil and covered the walls, including wrapping to the underside. It's helpful to apply some white glue on the underside to seal those edges down. For the surface of the lava itself, I used hot glue, just teased it around with the nozzle of the hot glue gun a whole bunch. And as a side note, that seals down the other edges of that aluminum foil. And after priming it with a nice gray, I painted the walls first with a dark brown, then a beigeish, tannish highlight. Really doesn't matter too much. Just a simple dry brush. And finally yellow, orange, red in that order in the airbrush. Solid yellow first everywhere, and then more toward the periphery, the orange. And at the very periphery, the red. By the way, if you like this result, make sure you check out my volcano video from a few months back. I'll put a card on the screen. Now the third pit trap has a secret door in its south wall, so I'll just use my normal secret door clip-on to represent that. And there's another short 10-foot crawl space. So once again, just one of those 2D crawl spaces. And moving on, stairs descend to the west, and the corridor that extends beyond the bottom of the steps is slightly cloudy with fear gas. I'm going to do this as an insert. To show the foggy hallway, I just took some product packaging. This is the clear plastic from, the front of a toy or something like that. I cut out the rectangle so it would insert into the hallway, airbrush some light gray onto it, just some swirls, and not shown here, but I did take it outside and seal it with some matte clear spray. Once the south door in that hallway is opened, we come to 18A, the false crypt. Beyond the door, a stairway leads down. The way is blocked by thick webbing that fills the area from steps to ceiling. For the spiderwebs, I've previously done this into water, but it works on this silicone mat too. So I just drizzle hot glue all over the place, give it a minute to cool, then it peels right off and I can cut out the rectangle I need to insert into the hallway. So they clear the webs and move on, and lying on the floor at the bottom of the stairs is an iron mace inlaid with silver. That's just an item, I'm not going to model that. South of this location is a modest-sized room filled with rotting and decaying furnishings. Well, to represent that, I'm just going to use the rubble piles that I made out of my old pit traps from earlier. Now, characters who enter the room will see a solid gold couch along the back wall. A skeletal figure that resembles a lich wearing a crown on its head rises slowly from the couch. This is actually just a greater zombie, but the trick is to make the party think that it's actually a Sirarak. The miniature for my greater mummy, the fake Sirarak, is just a 3D printed model from Miguel Zavala. He's the guy who made all of the D&D monsters for free. You can download the STLs and print them. I actually met him at Mace this year. Great guy, check out his collection, check out his Patreon. Now let's look back at some of the artwork from the original first edition module to get some inspiration for the gold couch. Well, I see those circular bloom things on either side, and I remember my beads bin. These look kind of similar to the picture, so I took some toothpicks and white glued them on, about an inch apart. Made 2 of those and white glued them to a base of chipboard, just a small rectangle. And on the bottom, gluing on 4 beads of the same size and shape. Primed it with gray, and then used this Plaid Treasure Gold. I love this paint. Plaid is a friend to the channel and to our community, and this is an excellent metallic gold. So there it is, and for reference, here was my first attempt at the couch, when I wasn't really trying, so I'm glad I went back. If the characters investigate the room's contents, they can see a jade coffer, the dead monster's fallen crown, and a fine leather bag. Now, the coffer might be worth modeling, so let's do that. The jade coffer I built exactly as for the chests back in room 13. To paint it, I just painted it with a jade green, that's convenient. Then I gave it a green wash, nicked the edges with the original jade, and attached some bit from my costume jewelry leftovers. Now I know this wasn't the most exciting of entries, a lot of hallways today, and honestly that took a lot of my actual construction time. But hopefully amongst all those miniature projects you found something that was helpful or that you liked. Recently something came up in my YouTube suggestions. It was a video talking about how this isn't a good dungeon, and in fact is a terrible dungeon, is unfun. It's because it's unfair and it relies on player ability rather than character ability. I can't argue any of that, but as I've said before, it doesn't mean you have to run it exactly as written. Of course, that calls into question, do you really need to model it as written? So, well, I forgot where I was going with that, but anyways, no matter which way you look at it, this is an iconic dungeon. My plan is to basically take it with me to gaming conventions and set it up for display. I like intriguing stories and interesting characters, but I've never been particularly good at coming up with them or, acting or role-playing, so I tend to gravitate toward old-school dungeon crawls like this one. My favorite module of all time is the Labyrinth of Madness, which is a 2nd edition module, and it was sort of intended as a spiritual successor to this one. Worth checking out if you love the Tomb of Horrors. I also know my upload frequency hasn't been great lately. Take comfort in knowing that I've actually gotten ahead on construction of this thing. So some of the larger rooms later on have actually already been constructed. Now I'm just working on the details, the little features of the room that make it interesting. Well, we're about halfway through this beast, and I'm enjoying making it. I hope you're enjoying watching it. If the idea of crafting for your tabletop games is new to you, you should know I'm not alone. Find us on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild, 35,000 members strong and growing. And if you enjoyed this particular video, then here's 2 other similar ones that I think you'll like also. Till I see you next time, I'm Wylock. Thanks for joining me. Make things and play games. What I have for you today are 2 new rooms, some trap inserts, some new clip-ons, and even a scratch-made miniature on part 6 of my no compromise Tomb of Horrors build. Part 6, let's keep the momentum going. Glue guns on, brushes up, all cannons to bear. Let's craft some Tomb of Horrors. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. Room 19, the laboratory and mummy preparation room. All the walls are lined with shelves, and upon that are old jars and ingredients. There's a desk, 2 workbenches, and 2 mummy preparation tables. All over there's pots, urns, ointments, oils, linen wrappings, and all kinds of other junk. So there's a lot of flavor in that description. I don't think it's worth modeling all of it to a T. I'm going to make enough little stuff to make the room look chaotic, make it feel like a laboratory. Work smart, not hard. Jars and bottles on the shelves. I'm going to tap all the way back to, I think it's episode 7, the potion vendor, and just make a bunch of those. So I've got these rainbow beads, and then these much smaller Toho seed beads. I simply attach 2 of them together with some super glue and accelerant, and then super glue that potion onto a shelf, which is just a popsicle stick painted brown and hot glued onto a normal clip-on. Again, we've covered clip-ons before, so I won't go into detail here. Although the whole room is lined with shelves, I'm only going to make 4 of these and scatter them randomly. That's enough to give the idea and trick the eye into thinking that there's a lot of chaos in the room. I think for mummy preparation chamber, it is important that I hone in on the linens. And for some reason, I can't shake the image of those parchment rolls from Skyrim. You know what I'm talking about? Well, if you don't, here's what they look like. Anyway, I took some beige cardstock. This is thin 30-pound cardstock. A manila folder would work fine too. And I just manually ripped it so I have crude rough edges. Strips that are about, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide. Then I mixed up some white PVA glue, such as Elmer's, with a dab of brown paint and some water to thin it, and just mix that up into a slurry, then douse the strip with it, and roll it up. Should only take a few minutes to dry, and then they can be attached. These tables are just more wood grain done the same way that I do my doors. And here's an example of one where I'm actually having it drape, like it's unrolled and it's sort of hanging off of the table. You'd be surprised how little effects like that help to sort of sell the overall final result. Some of these I stacked into piles. And I have a bunch of these left over. I made a ton, so real quick I cut out some chipboard bases and painted those up with my dungeon scheme, black, dark gray, gray. And glued on some more potions and linens and a couple of the random things I found in my bits bin that have been sitting there for a few years. These can be placed anywhere around the room to, again, help create the illusion of chaos and really sell it as a laboratory. In the south part of the room are 3 large vats that contain murky liquids. The western one has dirty water, the middle one has a slow-acting acid, and the last one is filled with a grayish substance. For the vats, let's take a quick look at the original first edition module artwork for inspiration. Okay, so I see the general shape. It's got a big decorative skull on it. I'm going to use prescription bottle caps. And then this is a fairy garden fence that I got from the crafting store. I had intended to use it for some gothic building years ago. It's been sitting there ever since, but I chopped some short lengths, so just the spikes, and hot glued them on around the cap. And here's one of those plastic Halloween rings. Got a nice skull on it, just chopped off the ring portion and hot glued that onto one of the legs. From there, this has some smooth plastic, so it's primer, then base it in black, and then dry brush it with a metallic. Any metallic will do. I really like this treasure gold from Plaid. Plaid continues to be a great friend to the channel and our community. But just a good dry brush over black creates an instant illusion of shadow, an ancient texture. Nice. To do the vat with the dirty water, I simply took the clear resin that I like to use, mixed up a batch, and mixed in a drop of dark green wash. This is, I think, Athonian Camo Shade from Games Workshop. Not much, just a drop, and then worked it in there. Yeah, that's gonna look good. For the one containing the acid, again, that same resin, but I mixed it with a very intense light green. Poured that and then took another intense light green, slightly different, put in a couple drops and sort of tweaked it, swirled it around a little bit, just to give it a little something extra. And for the vat with the gray substance, I have these silver hot glue sticks courtesy of Surebonder. So I got the glue gun piping hot and just started to inject it in there. It doesn't mix uniformly, it's kind of got these swirls in it, which I'm guessing is like the exterior coating that has oil on it or something, but it looks pretty cool. I like it, and also super easy to do. I am awfully happy with how these came out, so I'll pause and show them off and take the opportunity to thank all of my patrons. Now that last vat is actually a gray ooze, so I used the same hot glue to make a miniature. The vat with the grayish substance is actually an ochre jelly. I assume that this was a gray ooze because the vat was filled with a grayish substance, and I glossed over that. I'm sitting here recording this, doing the final edit of the video, and I realize it's an ochre jelly. So, let's go make an ochre jelly. Well, I already made the gray ooze, so I might as well show you that. Real simple, just a triangle of chipboard that I sort of induced a curve into, hot glued that to a base, and then carefully covered this thing with that silver hot glue and painted the base black. Super easy, super effective. Yeah, it looks just like the T1000. Awesome. The ochre jelly is large, not medium, so this is a larger base. I super glued down 2 paper clips and bent them sort of into tentacles. Then some blobs of hot glue and these bubble-shaped hemispheres that I found at the dollar store. Stuck a couple of those in while the glue was still hot. Primed that up, base coated it with the airbrush, and painted it from there. Ochre jelly, which is apparently gray. Here's the artwork from the book, by the way, in the corner of the screen. I think I nailed it. Note that I did use 3 shades of golden yellow to highlight this guy, so that's not the light acting off of it you see, that is a gradient of different shades of yellow, or ochre. These mummies are just 3D printed. I found them on Thingiverse, and I'll put a link in the video description below. Printed, painted, shaded, glued. 20 huge pit filled with spikes. This is a 10-foot deep and 20-foot wide pit. It's got a pressure plate in it that causes spikes to shoot up. Amazing. Groundbreaking stuff. It was the 70s. Moving on to room 21, the agitated chamber. This room is filled with funerary offerings and furniture. There's rotting sofas, there's chairs, jumble of stands and small tables. Stuff is dented, chipped, and broken. There's some tapestries hanging on the east and west walls. And among the general havoc are scattered several large trunks and a number of coffers. Okay, for all that trash in the room, I'm just going to represent it with a couple of these wreckage tokens that are the reappropriated pit traps, which we covered earlier. And also whipped up a couple chests. I've covered these before, earlier in this mini-series and earlier on the channel. I'll throw cards on the screen. These wall hangings, which depict weed-grown rocks and green and gold tan scenes of underwater sea life, are special, anti-magic treated creations of green slime and brown mold. Once again, I'm going to print and paste onto some rather large clip-ons. These are going to be about 20 feet long in-game. I just use Google image search and then Photoshop to sort of tweak the image into only having brown and green. This is actually a really cool trap. I love this. Basically, to put it very, very short, if the tapestry is yanked down, it turns into a green slime, and if it's burned, it turns into a brown mold. The clues are there in the picture, because the picture only has tones of green and brown in it. For the patches of brown mold, I simply cut a rectangle out of chipboard, painted it up with a couple shades of brown, some white glue, and then flocked it with this battlefield dust stuff from Army Painter, as well as a couple tufts of very dark grass. Made 2 of them to be prepared for the possibility that the players try and burn both tapestries. Green slimes, similar chipboard rectangle, cut into an ooze sort of shape, then cover it with hot glue and tease it all around, make it look chaotic, and paint it green. Also finished off the green slimes with a gloss varnish. Again, 2 of them. And now let's fly through all of it in context. We picked up last time at the false crypt, so we'll go backwards up those stairs, and then down the cloudy hallway, up some more stairs to a nondescript secret door, which is like on the landing, sort of. Easy to miss. Anyway, it goes through this passage, through a door, and into the mummy preparation room. I really love the dungeon clutter scatter pieces. Those were kind of spur of the moment. They'd make good treasure tokens for Frostgrave or something. But the possibilities are endless. Whenever you overmake stuff, just glue it to a slab and now it's scatter terrain. Personally, my biggest, happiest spot from this whole video, the linen wraps. Got lucky on that one, but they look perfect. One thing to note, if you use that particular brand of resin, it's in my Amazon storefront, but if you use that brand, it does take a day, maybe two, to cure totally, despite what the bottle says, but it will get there. So don't risk trying to touch it at 6 hours in or whatever, because you'll leave a fingerprint. Moving on through the west of that room, there's another stairway, the ingenious pit trap, and then another secret door to a regular door, and then into the room with all the clutter in it. And obviously these inserts wouldn't be there to start with, but once triggered, I just drop them in as needed. And for the false trapdoor in the corner over there, I just use another standard door clip-on. It's misleading for the players in the meta sense. Alright, fine people, stick with me because the best rooms are coming up. If you like this video and or series, feel free to subscribe, and if the idea of crafting for your tabletop games is new to you, you should know I'm not alone. Check us out on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild, over 30,000 members. By the way, here's 2 other videos that I think you'll enjoy. I am Wylock, make things and play games. Today, we will build one of the most infamous PC killers of all time. If you've been crushed by it, you know the one that I'm talking about. It's Halloween season, baby. You gotta get out to the craft store. Skulls and bones galore. And also, I build a huge new cavern tile and try my hand at some new techniques to build a grotto for a possible ally in the Tomb of Horrors. Let's get on with it. Hello everyone, Wylock here. Thank you for joining me once again for our No Compromise Tomb of Horrors build. This is part 7. Presumably you know the drill by now, so I'm going to take you right to the crafting table, but hey, real quick, if you're really digging this series, please feel free to share it on the social media platforms. I am 35 years old. I don't have the time or interest to learn all of them. And on that note, if I don't reply to you, that's why. It's nothing personal. Okay, let's go. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. We left off here in room 21, so going behind the tapestry through the secret door, and then there's some hallways here with some tricks and traps, not worth going into. I'm gonna jump right over this big cavern, room 22, the Cavern of Gold and Silver Mists. A thick silver mist shot through with delicate streamers of gold partially blocks your view of the area that lies ahead. Okay, I'm not going to model mist. But at the center of the cavern is a small grotto in which dwells the fey being Siren. So here I've drawn out a 6x6 grid on some good stock of double corrugated. This is from TV that I bought. And I'm going to freehand draw on the shape of the cavern and then cut that bad boy out. This is going to be one of the larger tiles I think I've ever made. For the walls, I was originally going to do more of the tin foil rolled up and stacked, but I thought back to the Underdark tiles I did last year. I was really happy with how those came out, and they're a lot easier to do, so I figured I'd try that here. Cutting out 1/2-inch wide strips of more double corrugated cardboard, and then laying a thick bead of hot glue around the perimeter, and putting those strips on. Notice the way that I cut it so that the corrugation is open, it can drink in all that hot glue. And just kind of bend it, force it, bend it to your will so that it sticks around the perimeter there. This is some old school DMG info style right here. Love it. And now again, repeating that technique from the Underdark tiles, laying a thick bead of hot glue along the bottom of the wall and then teasing it upward with the nozzle of the hot glue gun. Kind of giving the illusion of stalactites, or stalagmites, whichever one comes from the ground. So with the walls all textured up with hot glue, got this 1/4 inch thick cork sheeting, and I'm just going to hand break pieces that are about 1 1/4 inch square. I want them to be irregular, not square, and I've got that grid that I pre-drew on, so it should be very easy to hot glue these down and introduce a little chaos by deliberately having some of them overlap their grid line and others undershoot. Makes it look a little more like a craggy cavern floor while still giving you a grid to work with. While I'm at it, I started the grotto. So, chipboard, this is graphics medium chipboard. Love this stuff. If you've been watching this series, you know what it is. Links are in the video description below. But I cut out a rough shape as the base, and then started stacking hand-broken pieces of cork sheeting around the perimeter. Different sizes, different shapes, offsetting each other, sort of like subway bricks, and just building up a grotto, having some fun with it. Yeah. Now this assembly is very fragile, very weak. So, I slathered it with neat white glue, not diluted, although a soaked wet brush will help to dilute the glue on the piece and sort of help it get into all the crevices. But I just slathered that full of white glue and set it overnight to dry. And while that was going on, I went about making my hallways. So many hallways. This certainly was in the early days of inefficient dungeon design. Hallways for hallways' sake. God, these are annoying, and they're so little reward. But 2-hour hack session later, I had all the hallways for this section done. Next day, the grotto's good to go, hard as a rock. So I based it in black, overbrushed with a dark gray, and dry brushed with a light gray. Now at this point I realized this isn't a modular piece. It doesn't need to agree with any of the other stuff in my collection. Therefore, it's an opportunity to experiment with some stuff, because normally I would stop here. So I took this homemade dark brown wash and just slathered it all over, and then took some blue wash and dabbed on a few spots. This looked really cool while it was wet, and I had high hopes, but then when it dried, it was just dark. I may as well have not done anything. So I brought it back up with a little bit of that dark gray and moved on. Actually, as I'm sitting here editing this, that looks pretty darn good actually. It doesn't look that good in person. Oh well. Laid down a very light gray base coat because I ran out of white paint, and then hit it with this Vallejo Magic Blue color. Love it, it's a vivid blue. And then some dark scurvy green and some patches to indicate depth. And I'm not worried about overspray onto the rock here. In fact, that's kind of the idea. This is like a magical grotto, and maybe the water is glowing a little bit up onto the surfaces of the rock. I also went with some plain green and did some random patches, and found that this complemented the blue really well, so I put some random spots on the walls as well. A bunch of these army painter tufts. Let's see, those are from my orc army, so I think I'm going to go with these light green ones. They're the only other ones I have. Pick a few spots, some of them in the water, some of them creeping out of rocks. And now some clear resin. I love this stuff. 50-50, and then a few drops of green wash. This is Army Painter Green Tone. It ended up being 3 drops total. Mixed that up really good and poured. So here's the grotto all done with Siren in place. The end result is a little bit disjointed. It doesn't quite click. I'm not sure what it is. If you have tips, feel free to leave a comment below. I think it has to do with contrast and not having a bright blue in the mix somewhere. Or maybe those tufts are just really out of place. But this was a good little opportunity to try something new and learn things not to do. So, good. Getting back to the big cavern tile itself, after basing it in black, I just overbrushed with a large brush, a very dark, muted brown, followed by a heavy dry brush with a rich, chocolatey sort of brown. Then a dry brush with sort of a cinnamon color. And finally, a very light touch with this vanilla that I mixed in with the cinnamon. And you can see with a very light touch, it really only catches the edge of the squares and sort of does edge highlighting for you. It's a really nice, easy effect. Takes a little bit of a knack, but in a matter of seconds, you'll master it. Nice, dig it. So, going up the hallways, we go north. There's some more tricks and traps I'm not going to go into in this video. We've made doors and pit traps before. But we come up to room 23. When the doors to the north are opened, sleep gas billows forth from the other side, and then a stone juggernaut, rather like a steamroller, comes out of the 20-foot square room in the north and rolls south. Everything it rolls over is squashed to a pulp, and there is no appeal. Juggernaut. Okay, let's look at the original module for some artwork inspiration, and that's an elephant. I'm not crazy about that, and I don't know how to craft an elephant. You know what? Skulls are badass. Skulls always work. So look at this. This is table scatter for like a Halloween party. I got this at Michael's. It's got some skulls and some bones in it. And I've got these 2 Gatorade caps and a cardboard tube, which I cut to length and hot glued the caps onto. Then a strip of cardstock around the outside to sort of smooth things out, give it a little bit of more depth. For the back wheel, I just imagine it as like a stabilizer. So 2 standard bottle caps hot glued together and then hot glued to the big roller, just like this. For good measure, super glue on some gears here and using some accelerant spray to stick them on quick so I can move on with the project. From there, with a combination of hot glue and super glue accelerant, I built up a structure with the bones to kind of tie those 2 rollers together and give a mounting point for one of these skulls. Because I think if something's rolling down the hallway and it's going to crush you, a giant skull is better than an elephant. At least that's the way I'd prefer to go. Outside for a good spray primer, and then I base coated with a bone color. The rollers I based in a goblin green. This is a lighter green because I intend to use a wash. Remember, if you're going to wash, make sure your base coat is a much brighter color than you think appropriate. Because here we go, I'll apply the green wash and it really dampens it down nicely. Also flesh wash, you could use Agrax Earthshade Strong Tone, whatever, some sort of dirty wash over all the bones. Painted the big steamroller portion metal, glued in some flat back gemstones to the eyes, and stippled on some Vallejo gory red as blood from past victims. Yes. Here is the Juggernaut completed. Now that is a device I wouldn't mind dying to. Elephant. What were they thinking? So yeah, I took a liberty here. I know this is supposed to be the no compromise Tomb of Horrors build, but yeah, whatever. This little package of scatter was $2, so I'm pretty happy with this little thing. So as always, let's do a partial setup of our progress so far. We left off in room 21 with the tapestries that turn into green slimes and brown molds. We go through the secret door, we do some other stuff, we go down the stairs that many of you really seem to geek out on. Here's our intrepid party, and there's a pit trap in the middle of this crossroads. Down at the south end, there's a trick door. Yeah, very cute, kind of just filler. Here's a phasing trap. I don't really know what that means. We go down the hallway, and here is our cavern tile with the grotto in it and Siren in her grotto. I love the fact that these two don't match, that they don't look alike. Longtime viewers will know that my goal has never really been realism. My goal is spectacle. And the more color contrast there is between this room and this feature, the more it calls the player's attention to the feature itself. Plus, I just wanted to experiment with a new color scheme for a possible future set of new cavern tiles. Anyway, we'll come out of there, we go down the hallway, blah blah blah, through a secret door, up here, and finally, we come to Mr. Tons of Fun himself. Now the front roller is exactly 2 inches wide. That was deliberate, so that it can fit in the hallway. Play it, model it as written. And it's right at this point where you say to yourself, ugh, Mondays. So there you have it, folks. It is really starting to come together now. Well, want to thank you for continuing to take this journey with me. That's another chapter for the books. If you haven't already, make sure you come and find us on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild, over 35,000 members strong and growing. Also, to all of you who keep giving me suggestions about which iconic module to model next, stop it! I am never doing anything like this project again. Here's some other videos that you might like. I'm Wylock, make things and play games. Hello everyone, Wylock here. Thanks for joining me for part 8 of the Tomb of Horrors build. Largest room of the dungeon today, and I had a couple of mishaps, but this ended up being a lesson in perseverance, so I'm going to show it to you as it happened. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. First thing to get out of the way is this 10 square long, single space wide corridor, or tunnel. So that's made the exact same way as I've done before. Gets the dark gray, then the stamp, and then blacked out. I also connected these pieces together with tape so that they'd swivel, easier for storage and for keeping track of, one piece instead of 3. Now here's the hallway segment that leads up to the big room 25, and notice I've got this mounting point here that's set a 1/4 inch in from where the wall normally would be. That is to allow room for the adamantine block. This block is a double clip-on, so the players will approach it first, and I can clip it on at that time, but then later it is able to connect this hallway to the big room on the other side, as well as joining 2 of the quarters of that big room on the other side. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So having this double clip-on really helps everything from a practical, technical standpoint on the table. 25, the Pillared Throne Room. You look upon an enormous chamber colored in pastels. A forest of massive, many-hued columns support the ceiling. Pastels. This room is a massive room. I am not going to do it in one tile. I divided it into fourths. So I'm using double corrugated cardboard as usual, attaching on my walls, which are 3/4 of an inch tall. I'm also attaching those 3 small rooms in the north side. I'm going to make those part of the tile rather than like an insert. It's just going to be easier for later on. Then I set about the chipboard squares. A lot, and I mean a lot, of squares. Over 400 for this room alone. But I kept at it, about 6 months and some carpal tunnel lit. I'm just kidding. It was like 2 hours to do all this, but my wrist was killing me. Got them all done, cut the chips in 25% of them or so, and then drew a grid on the tile to help myself make sure it was all aligned when they're hot glued on. And here we go. I go to hot glue it, and oh no! My hot glue gun is broken. I can feel something giving way in the trigger. See, it's moving, but it's not pushing hot glue. And I've taken this model apart before. It's not easy to put back together. So I'm thinking this one is probably toast. But not to worry. Boom. The Surebonder 100 watt hot glue gun. This has been sitting in my cabinet for some time. Perfect opportunity to check it out. Look how much bigger it is. This thing is awesome. So while this is plugged in and heating up, I'm just going to take a moment. Let's review its features. This is the Pro 2 TAC 100 watt high output professional hot glue gun. It has safety features. Oh, with an asterisk and no corresponding asterisk, so that concerns me a little, but whatever. Interchangeable nozzle, standard fare, got a trigger. Oh, and an on-off switch. An on-off switch, which seems to be presented on the front of the box like a feature. What a novel idea for an electronic device to have an on-off switch. Heavy duty, 1.5 pounds of glue per hour. Don't measure in sticks, measure in pounds. And 2.5 times more power than something. It's just got more power. Rockin'. Well, I'm excited to try it. Real quick, here it is in the lineup. The one in the middle is the one that's about to be retired. I've got my detail one on the other side, and then this bad boy. It is a monster. And it feels like butter. You just breathe on the trigger and it chews through this 7/16 inch hot glue gun stick. It is amazing, and the power is intoxicating, I won't lie. It is fun to use. In fact, it's almost unwieldy. You could not use this for doing detail work like I do on some of my other projects. I'm going to still use the small glue gun, but look at that. And I did a test with a stick. This thing never loses heat. It will chew through a stick completely. So, do we need 100 watts in our hobby? No. Should you buy this over the cheaper options? No. But really, should you buy this over the cheaper options? Oh yes. I like to embrace my inner Tim Allen. Good stuff. Thank you, Surebonder. Alright, so I got the 4/4 of the tile built. Checking to make sure that they line up nice, and of course they do. Then I've got my primer. Primer's not necessary because this is all chipboard and cardboard, but it's a lot faster, and it's a light color, so I hate brushing on light colors. These little foam cylinders, someone recommended to me. I can't remember who it was, I'm sorry. Leave a comment if it was you. But anyway, I bought some, and these are going to be my columns for room 25. So I simply hot glued 2 of them together. They stick together really well, and I made 100 of those. You need a little less than 100 for the room. Here it is ready to go, so I'm going to start painting. I joined them all together because I want whatever pattern I paint to carry over across the tile so it looks seamless. And I'm going to use these 4 pastel colors, right? You're greeted by a room full of pastels. So I picked these out, and I'm going to shield and airbrush some random streaks on there. Try and get a cool look. I think it's going to look neat. Do some blue, and another one. And I'm trying to aim for full coverage. At least you'll see that's what I was trying to do. And that's why I based it with white, because you get much better response from bright colors by basing with white instead of black. I also tried to do half of the pillars with blue, but you can see it's not really going well. There's a lot more air pressure there than I realized. These are not very heavy. But whatever, I moved on. Let's do pink. And I'm spattering all over the place. Some has spilled out. I'm trying... Oh my god. I remember this. Oh, why did I continue? So at this point I kept going. I tried the yellow, and we'll do some more yellow in there, because why not? Okay. And then finishing with this sickly green. It's called livery green, but really it's a hideous color. I hate it. And so I thought this would look awesome. This did not turn out like I hoped that it would. Yeah. So I've got a bit of a disaster on my hands, but it's important not to give up. This cannot be for nothing. After all, I just put an hour of my time into this and probably $10 worth of good miniature paints. And what did I get for it? The goddamn opening credits to Saved by the Bell. Looks like the coming up next transition between Rugrats and Doug. Looks like the rejected first draft of the bag art for marshmallow flavored Doritos. Looks like someone slit the throats of 4 Furby families. It looks like the sidewalk chalk art of my 6-year-old when he was 3. Looks like an Easter morning miracle. By miracle, we mean massacre. Looks like a prismatic thing that's not good. Just use one of those. Hey, I got an idea. You could chime in. Roast this result. Put a comment below. Whichever one I think is the funniest, after 2 weeks, will win a free set of Wylock's Armory dice. Okay, let's figure out what we're going to do. I saw the word pastels and my brain defaulted to, bright colors, but pastels can be dark as well, so here's 5 colors I've chosen that are a much more muted pastel. And I need more coverage in general, so I decided to make a stamp. I got some double corrugated cardboard, I'm going to chop up some chipboard, make some bricks, and because I have 5 colors, I'm going to cover about 20% of this thing with bricks. Then I'll try and coat it with the paint, just slather it on there, and we're going to give it a test run, and what you're about to see is it doesn't go well. That chipboard just drinks in the paint, which is one of the qualities I'm always touting about it, so it makes sense, but that's not going to work, you can see. The paint's just drying too fast. So I'm going to go old school, DM Scotty here. Dollar store foam board with the paper peeled off of both sides, and those will be my bricks. This has a very slick finish. The paint does not dry fast at all, so we'll see how this goes. And much better. I need to add a few more bricks. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to add a few more bricks, but the coverage is there. So first color up will be the yellow. Here we go. And moment of truth. Obviously I've re-primed this thing in black, and let's see how it goes. Yep, that'll work. Now, I'm turning the stamp and doing different placements, different turns with each color to make sure that I don't overlap the bricks, right? Because then the colors will cover each other up. That defeats the whole point. So here I'm gonna turn it a different direction, and I found that I can usually get 2, maybe 3 stamps between paint reloads, and it only took about 30 seconds per color per tile. So this whole process went pretty quick. And now the blue, get that on there, double checking to make sure I'm not repeating a pattern. Now at this moment is when I started to get excited. It was like, yeah, this is starting to look like a colored pastel floor, but is faded with age. It's ancient. And I didn't film the tan color, but I did that. And finally, here's the sweet potato color. Yeah, so there it is, all done. A room full of pastels, but still ancient and foreboding looking, like you'd see in the Tomb of Horrors. Up close, you can see the stamp texture a bit, but from even 12 inches away, oh man, it's so good. I am so happy with how this came out. So, persevere. If you don't succeed at first, try again. Those foam columns take paint really well, so I just did 1/5 of them in each color. And I made 100 columns total, so that's 20 in each color. Those are just attached to the tiles with a healthy blob of hot glue, and I attempt to never have the same color next to itself. And since I have 5 colors, that should always be possible. Now let's consider the features of the room. In the north wall there are 2 more devil faces, just like from the entrance hallway. The one in the northwest is green, but the one in the northeast is blue, and they're about 24 feet off the floor. So I made these exactly as described back in part 3 of this series, and I just put them on a very tall clip-on feature. The 2 outer small rooms along the north wall are actually a different room, number 26, small room with a door of electric blue. The doors sort of shimmer with a faint blue light. And similarly, the door in the center, leading to room 27, radiates a violet light. This is easy. I've got my usual doors painted up exactly the same way, but now I'm going to add on a dry brush of white, then a dry brush of blue. The white is just to make the blue pop stronger. And then intensify it in the middle with blue just a little bit to sort of hint at glowing. The door in the middle is violet, and that one was done up the exact same way. Dry brushing, and then a bit of focusing in the center to make it bloom and look like it's scintillating violet. Now the west chamber is empty, it's just got dust, but the eastern door has a low stone table with a wooden sarcophagus loaded with a mummy. First up, the stone slab. Dollar store foam board, peel the paper off both sides, chip it a little bit with the knife, beat it with some balled up tin foil for texture, and there we go, stone texture. Strengthen it up with a thick layer of Mod Podge, and then I painted it like all my other dungeon gray. For the sarcophagus itself, I decided to just use chipboard, hot glue it together, paint it with brown, dry brush it, nothing fancy here. Glue the 2 together, and I've got my nice insert there. The mummy itself is a 3D printed model. I printed it, primed it, painted it, and washed it. And before it was even dry, here I am gluing it in. Nice. So that's about 10 minutes of effort for that little feature right there. And if it does come to life, it becomes a mummy lord, so I've got a miniature for that too. Charred remains. Strewed near the southeast corner is a heap of charred bones and skulls, plus some other garbage, a frightening sight, and a character who comes close enough will find a huge glowing orange gem at the center of the destruction. It is a cursed gem. Jumping again to the 3D printer because I don't have a collection of small bones bits and I don't really want to craft anything, so this was easy. Base it up, paint it with a skeleton bone color, wash it with brown, a little bit of a dry brush afterwards to help bring things back up a little bit, and then that cursed orange gemstone. Just a flat back gemstone, glued on there with white glue. But then I had a thought, it'd be really neat if this were actually buried and hidden in the wreckage, just like the book says. So here is some paper towel. This is a mixture of beige and white glue. I'm just painting it on there and then giving it a few hours to dry and crisp up. It is very durable that way. And then hand tearing some bits, and I'm going to cover up just a little bit. So you can see I put some white glue to make like a hinge almost. The rest of it is not glued down. And this way, the flap can come up and the players at the table can actually discover the orange gemstone the way that it's written. So here's two directly related thoughts. Number one, it took me 3 hours to fall asleep after I thought of this idea. And number two, I'm lucky I met a woman early in life. South end of the chamber, contrasting with the pastel colors of the floor and pillars of the hall, is the stark blackness of the huge dais on the south wall, atop which sits an obsidian throne inlaid with silver and ivory skulls. Upon the throne rest a crown made of gold and a scepter made of electrum with a gold knob on one end and a silver cap on the other. Bag of wooden shapes here from the craft store. I'm going to start with this one, teardrop shape, and then cut a trapezoid of XPS foam, hot glue it on there, and we have our foundation. GW Skulls. I bought this way back when they very first came out, and it's been sitting on my shelf ever since. Time to finally use them. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, a lot of different species and sizes. For $20, it's a pretty good deal. Also, Tyrannid bits. I love using Tyrannid bits to evil stuff up, if you will. So here's some arms with claws, and I'm going to cut those claws off, use them as arm rests. I also have these wooden, I don't think they're crafting picks, but they're just picks. They have sort of a point on one end, round on the other. I'm just brainstorming here. Ended up gluing on 3, as you see, to make mounting points for the skulls. And then use super glue and accelerant to attach the skulls. Here's 3 more. Got the arms on there. So this is it before priming and painting. Nice. I also mounted a glass bead in the bottom for weight, because it was back heavy. Outside that goes for some spray primer, and while the spray primer is drying, I went about making the dais. I think we've been through this before. Anyway, it's just cascading sizes of this shape stacked up, double corrugated cardboard, hot glue, blah blah blah, all the usual hits. I also made this a clip-on because the back side of it is up against the wall and it's centered, so this can help hold the room together. Remember, I have it in quarters, so this will grab onto both walls and keep it together at the game table. Painted black, overbrushed with purple, and dry brushed with a light gray. I don't know if this accurately renders obsidian, but I just didn't want a hunk of jet black cardboard sitting there. I wanted to do something with it, so here we go. The throne got the same treatment, the overbrush with purple, and I edge highlighted with light gray. I don't often edge highlight on the channel because I hate doing it. I'm not patient. And I don't like it, and I'm not very good at it. But nonetheless, it gives incredible results. So, edge highlighted this, and now let's work on the crown and scepter. For the crown, look at this little bit of costume jewelry. Looks like it's a good crown scaled for a 28mm miniature. Use a nail set and a hammer to liberate the cubic zirconia, cut off those loops, and wham! Gold crown, ready for gluing. For the scepter, I continue to raid the costume jewelry bin, and I found this little bit here. We're going to use this. Along with one of these gold Toho seed beads. This is what I usually use for the caps of my potions. So a bit of super glue on there, and then quickly some accelerant to set it in place, and I've got a scepter. No paint required. Okay, I'll be back in 15 seconds. You guys just enjoy this final version of the throne. I'm gonna go set up the final tour. And here it is. This did prove difficult to capture on video. I don't know if it's the color palette or what, but it just doesn't look as good as it does in real life. Anyway, here's that adamantine block. It's the double clip-on, doing its job, holding everything together. Also, this points out a design choice I made. You'll notice the big room is split into 4, specifically so that there are no pillars on the seams. This is why I was able to attach them permanently and not have to worry about them hanging over the edge. 3 doors along the north, glowing, nice. Probably could have done something on these pillars, maybe a dry brush with a lighter color, edge highlight the top of the cylinder, and not worth it. And the devil heads I actually made months ago when I actually put out episode 3. I made these at the same time for efficiency. And nothing will compare to the rotating shot you just got, but here again is the throne on its dais. Nice large view there, or a wide view. And a character level view. Look on over here. Another look at the throne. Boy, that's harsh lighting. And then here's the charred remains pile. One more time for posterity. Take a look in there and find the cursed orange gem. This module is really fixated on colors. I noticed, particularly today, It's really specific about what color everything is. It's kind of unusual. Maybe it's intended to be a red herring for the players or something like that. Well, I hope you've had fun with me today. All the ways to support are in the links in the video description below. My longtime viewers will know that I like to bounce around from project to project, just whatever interests me at the time. I'm a little burned out on the Tomb of Horrors right now, so it may be a month or two before I get back to it, but rest assured, we're gonna have a big finish. Remember, if you haven't already, join the Tabletop Crafters Guild on Facebook, 35,000 members strong and growing. And here's a couple other videos that I think will interest you based on today's topic. I am Wylock, make things and play games. Hello everyone, Wylock here. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to part 9 of the Tomb of Horrors build, the penultimate episode. Got several rooms for you today, and even if you're not building the Tomb of Horrors, hopefully you'll have some techniques that you get from this that you can take away and apply to your own projects, one of which I'm particularly proud of. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. Note: at the very last moment of editing this video, I called a massive audible. Be sure and watch till the very end. 27A. Why do they do that? Why isn't it just 28? 27A, Chamber of Hopelessness. There are glowing letters magically written on the north wall that state blah blah blah. I'm not going to say it all. Also, there's a fountain in the room. Water streams out of the wall. Again, we'll look at the artwork from the original module. Now, I am no a person who does calligraphy, so I Photoshop printed and painted the words that are on the wall, gave them a glow, and just put that on a big clip-on. So that'll go in this room of despair. Yeah, it came out nice. Tip: whenever you're trying to do a glow, make sure it's white in the middle. Not a bright version of the color that you want, but white, and then the aura around it is the color that you want. That's what'll make it look really electric and powerful. And this fountain, you know, the artwork has a fish there. I'm going to take some liberty here, though. This is one of those Halloween rings, so I push it really hard to flatten it out with hot glue against this back piece, and use that so the water will come out of its eyes, a little more imposing. So this is a clip-on fountain for the room. I mix up my favorite clear resin with a drop of brown and green ink in there because water is not blue. Give that a stir, drizzle along the eyes, and pour. And there we go. Fountain done. Now supposing we escape, let's go back south. We resume in room 27, the portal of scintillating violet. There's a bare chamber with a small door in the north wall and pairs of swords crossed behind shields hung upon the walls. 3 sets on each of the side walls and 2 more flanking that door. Long story short, these are flying swords that will attack in a trap-like manner. Let's get a look at some of the artwork from the original module just to get a taste. Alright. Wooden matchsticks, and I think I actually changed to toothpicks, but either way, using those with some chipboard for the shields and painting them up. And there we go. 1 on each side of the door, and 3 on each of the side walls, just like the module says. So these are 3 clip-on features for that little room. Room 28, the Wondrous Foyer. The walls of the area ahead are untarnished and gleaming copper panels with some wood. The ceiling is silver. I don't have ceilings. The chamber widens to the south where a set of gently sloping steps leads upward. These 6 steps from nearest to farthest are made of onyx, pink marble, lapis, black marble, yellow serpentine, and malachite. Again, quick look at the artwork. Okay, look at this room. Yes! Love it. Recreational trigonometry, the best kind. I spent like an hour on this room. I didn't need to, I just chose to. Took a nice measured approach because I love doing trigonometry. So here's the inserts, cascading and decreasing in size. These are the 6 steps called out in the module. And these are painted up 6 different ways to the best of my ability, which is amateur to journeyman at best. I Google image searched what each of these materials are in order to be able to paint them. So there we go. And notice that 3-inch wide bump on the back wall. That's to give something to clip onto for the mithril doors that we're doing in the next section. I thought ahead and added that because I knew that the stairs were going to be at the height of my wall. Location 29, the Valves of Mithril. The doors at the top of this stairs are really big and made of solid mithril. 3 feet thick and magic proof, sure, why not? There's also a blood trap. If it's attacked, it will not budge, but if damaged, it will begin to bleed. All the blood of those who have died in the tomb before. And then in the next column, you can see there's some what ifs, and it is possible for this to animate into a huge red ochre jelly. Okay, mithril is a very bluish, gleaming, silvery material to the best of my understanding, so I didn't put a lot of effort into these. They're silver doors. But let's talk about the traps in the room. So this giant blood ooze. I looked through my bases and found a massive base that I don't plan on ever using again. It'll work for huge. And then the method is identical to the ochre jelly from earlier in the module. So some paperclip armatures as tendrils reaching out, these hemispherical beads as bubbles, drizzling lots of hot glue to fill in and form the ooze body. And then painting it is just airbrush with red, after priming it, of course. But I'm not doing any wash or different shades. This is supposed to be blood. I'm not going to apply a gloss varnish because that films horribly, and also because I generally just don't like to use a gloss varnish. But yeah, blood ooze. So there it is. Now for all these weird what ifs, I don't know why you would ever try to cast polymorph on a blood ooze, but if you do, it changes into the 7 whites. And I bought these miniatures from Rune Wars. Really, I just bought the box because it came with a whole bunch of miniatures. It was a good bang for your buck, and these are great miniatures. Here's an up-close look at one. Now this is a skeleton, not a white, but I've got 7 of them. It's economical, it's undead, and from 3 feet away, it's going to be painted solid red, so whatever. It's just an amorphous, humanoid, red, undead thing. So I primed those and painted those up in the exact same way. Now I'm ready for this encounter, as written, however it might go down. Room 30, the False Treasure Room. This chamber has ivory walls, a floor of polished agate, that'll be tricky, and in each corner stands a statue of black iron, easily 9 feet tall, and it tells you that each one has a different weapon type. Near the center of the room is a large bronze urn filigreed in gold. A thin stream of smoke issues from a tiny vent in its brass stopper, and on the southern wall stands a granite sarcophagus, damaged and flanked by 2 large iron chests. I went after the statues first. I thought Chaos Space Marines, if done right and with the high-tech parts clipped off, modified, that they would make a pretty good substitute for these 4 statues. So I found the weapons that are described in the module, kit bashed together what you see here, primed them up, and then painted. So the painting was actually very simple. Solid black base coat, although you can see in this one I missed some of the gold under there from underneath, but solid black base coat, and then an overbrush with gunmetal, and that's it. Black metal, easy. Pretty much looks the part. No one is going to care from 3 feet away anyways. So, good. For the floor itself, it is polished agate. I went to Google image search. I found some polished agate, and I thought I would do print and paste. That's what I tried at first. Painted the walls white, glued in the floor, here we go, and this just didn't look right. Partially because it's way out of scale relative to 28mm miniatures, and also I wasn't happy with it. So I walked away for 4 months. Now I'm back, and I washed the walls because they are made of ivory, which is actually not white. It's a little bit beigeish. It's like the tusks of elephants, right? So I made that a little more interesting than flat white. Then I took some chipboard, gave it a solid base coat with this light blue, and this would work for any color, of course, but the very lightest color of whatever you're doing. Now to create the agate effect, it's not really mixed together. There are discrete bands of color in agate. So I took multiple paint brushes of different types and used different colors of paint, different shades of blue, and like you can see here, drew them along and sort of created an agate effect. Now, I think some of the keys are you don't want to have lots of overlap. They can end at each other like this, if that makes sense. But you can see here with the second color, I'm sort of chasing along with the previous color. That's sort of how agate looks. I eventually lose that discipline, and you'll see I start doing all sorts of crossed over and chaotic stuff, which it sort of doesn't look the part anymore. So that's a lesson learned. Luckily, I get away with it in this project because I'm about to cut this thing up into many little squares. But if you're trying to do an agate effect, like a veiny gemstone, I think this is a pretty cool approach. So there's the square all done up, and I gave it an hour to dry because even though it feels dry, it's still seeping into that chipboard, and any warping that's going to happen will take place over the next few hours. But once that's done, cutting it up into 1 1/4 inch squares and hot gluing them in. Yes. Oh, hot gluing the squares in. This was so satisfying. Yeah, I've never done drugs, but I can't imagine I'll ever need to because this has to be what it feels like. Yes. Oh man, so good. So yeah, Google image search polished agate, and you'll see that this is kind of what it looks like. After cutting up these squares, I just sort of mixed them and tossed them in a big pile like a kid shuffles a deck of cards to make sure I got good randomness. And so, I always do the self-deprecating thing and the critiquing, but that is f***ing awesome. I've no words for how happy I am with how this turned out. One thing that might have helped a little bit, finishing the newly exposed edges on the square that I've just cut with a Sharpie or something, but I don't have that kind of time, and from 3 feet away, you're not going to see it anyway. I know you sort of can in the video, but at the table, it's fine. So a couple finishing touches. We have that granite sarcophagus on the southern wall. Just made that out of foam, dinged it up real good, hit it with Mod Podge for strength, and then painted it gray. Didn't put a whole lot of effort into it. I could do an entire episode on making a granite sarcophagus and, spend 10 minutes talking about how to make it look awesome. This took me like 5 minutes to make. It's one tiny piece of a much larger project. It's really not worth focusing on. If you have something that you're going to reuse a lot, sure, put the time and energy into it. But for something like this, I don't have time to make every single piece a work of art. So you'll see that I've done, in my job we call it value-based maintenance, but value-based crafting. Don't put a lot of energy into something that is a very boutique application. Flanking the sarcophagus are 2 iron chests. These are simply chipboard boxes that I threw together. A couple of these like pointy bead things that I just found in my collection. Bent them and they look like good clasps. Gave it a dark wash and then a silver dry brush, standard stuff. And I attached all 3 to a clip-on since they are along the southern wall and they are attached. I thought that made sense. It'll be easier for storage because it is at this point in the project that I'm starting to think about and realize that long-term storage is going to be an issue. And lastly, near the center of the room is that large bronze urn, filigreed in gold. This is one of those cylindrical wooden bits that you've probably seen at the crafting store. Painted it bronze and painted the caps in gold. For the wisp of smoke coming out, I took a Q-tip, teased it out a bit, drenched it in white PVA glue, and hot glued the stick into the center of the piece. Pretty easy. So that does it for room 30, and in fact, that's everything we're going to build for today. So let's do a partial setup on the table and fly through it. Showing room 25, and here in the north end, the portal of scintillating violet. Remember, value-based crafting. It doesn't always have to be a work of art. Simple swords and shields, especially since, honestly, the miniatures are probably not even going to stand in that room. This room of despair. Cool concept. I like it. Give them just enough water to keep them alive and starving to death. These skeletons were just 3D printed, painted, and washed. Enormous thank you, as always, to all my Patreon patrons. Much appreciated. Let's go back across, to the south, under the throne, through the secret chamber. Here's all those blood miniatures in reserve, just in case they're needed. I would have them off the side of the table. And the grand foyer. Now, the mithril doors, I confess, they stick out like a sore thumb. I need to do more to those. I've been keeping a running punch list of final to-dos before I get to Asirak's tomb, and those are on them, so I'll be redoing those in the next episode. This room came out nice. Dungeons don't always have to be dark. This is, after all, the false treasure room, false throne room. So this module has not 1, but 2 final encounter fake-outs. Once again, before I hear anything about it, I'm not putting gloss varnish on that floor. Doesn't look good. Say what you will about the quality of the Tomb of Horrors as a module, but it does not shy away from color. I'll give it that. It is a fabulous dungeon. Alright, thank you so much for watching. All that's left is to construct Asirak's tomb. Wait. It's 11:45 at night. I was just about to click render and then go to bed for the night to have the video done and ready to upload tomorrow. This just doesn't look right. The easy critique is it's too colorful, but I haven't had any qualms with that in the series so far. It just so doesn't jive with the pastels of the room next to it. Maybe that's accurate or intended. I'm kind of terrified to do this, but I am going to risk just doing a few easy techniques to make this look darker, more weathered, jiving with the rest of the tiles, like it's an ancient tomb and not something that's perfectly fresh from HGTV. Alright, saddle up and get her done. I laid out some tiles from earlier in the dungeon that had color in them to see what the issue was, just for contrast. Those didn't stick out like a sore thumb, so what exactly is it? It might be as simple as weathering and aging, so that's where I started. Black wash, 10 parts water to 1 part black acrylic craft paint, and it terrified me to do this, but I did it, because I love that floor, but I did it. It will dry much lighter than it goes on wet, so that's not a concern. Nonetheless, I really just want to dull this down. I don't want to add any texture per se, so I dabbed away a lot of the excess with a paper towel after about a minute. This chipboard, even though it's been painted with all that blue, is still very absorbent, and so after about a minute, you'll see that it's pretty much on its way to being set. I also applied the wash to the walls, which would include the clip-on, which has been painted to match. 2 types of wash generally add some nice complexity. It doesn't look anything like ivory anymore, but whatever, artistic license. Here's an earring from my costume jewelry collection. Just glued that onto the sarcophagus. Little something extra, like a magic symbol, something foreboding. Alright, so that piece looks a little more complexified. I like it. Now the floor has lost its luster. Well, not luster, but it's just the color vibrance, which is, I don't know what I expected. I mean, that's exactly what I thought would happen. To bring back some of that vibrance, I thought I would try some high gloss varnish. Yes, 1 thick coat, hour to dry, and then a 2nd thick coat. And you can see here in real time the effect. It just makes the color pop more because of the way that the light plays off of it. And I did the same thing to the wondrous foyer steps, which I had also given that light black wash and dabbing technique. But with that done, this floor looks awesome. And it's like I've always said, never be afraid to use high gloss varnish. It can really make a project stand out. Alright, what else we got? Let's talk about the urn. A little bit of black wash on that as well, and then dry brushing a light gray on the plume to make it a little more smoke-like. 2 dead simple things with a lot of return on investment. Looks much better, a little bit more complex. And here it is in context, and having used that same wash just looks like it's suspect to the same ages of grime. Nice. Spiderwebs never hurt. You can add them in to age something up and make it seem ancient. So this is a dish of water, drizzle hot glue in it, then it cuts very easily with scissors. And I took a few snippets and glued them in a couple spots around the room. Now, the mithril doors. Here we go. Once more with feeling. This is a necklace from my costume jewelry bin again. I'm going to attach it to a wooden dowel with super glue and then put a length on the door with a gear between 2 of them. And the idea is that these ratcheted poles get moved by the gear. So as the gear rotates, 1 pole comes up and 1 goes down. These are going into the floor and ceiling, and that's what's locked these doors shut. The valves of mithril, right? So as the gear turns, when the players put in the right key, those retract and now the doors can be opened. So those are painted up with that same brilliant silver I was using, some copper on the gear works, washing those with like a flesh wash or Agrax or something, doesn't really matter. Give them a little bit of depth. And then mithril is defined as a brilliant bluish silvery metal. At least that's what's on the Wikipedia. So I took some Army Painter blue wash and tried a little bit of dabbing. Worked it around, blotted some off, but this dries really quite dull. This didn't give me the effect I was hoping for. Then I remembered I have some Gullman blue left over. This is out of production now. It's a glaze, not a wash, not a paint, a glaze, and it has very high pigment. It is a brilliant, brilliant blue. So I went over the spots doing the exact same technique, trying to get a little bit of blue luminescence, make this look like mithril. And I spent so much time on it because I need to define what mithril looks like. Asirak's tomb is a vault of mithril. That's going to be in the next episode. So whatever I do for mithril now, I'm going to do then, and it has to be sustainable. So here, The original doors and the new doors. So much better. And it's like I've always said, you need to put your heart and soul into every piece. Don't cut corners. Everything needs to be a work of art. Okay, let's try this again. In context, from afar, it looks much better dulled down. It blends in with the rest of the dungeon aesthetically. Love it. And we've got our intrepid party we've been following that's going through the dungeon. We'll get down to a party's eye view, looking up at the valves of Mithril, across the wondrous foyer. Nice. Yeah. Alright, I'll just be quiet for about a minute here and let you enjoy the close-ups. Alright, thank you so much for watching. All that's left is to construct Isirerak's tomb, and then to put the entire dungeon together without compromise and do a grand tour. All of that will be in the 10th and final episode of this series. Till then, I'm Wylock, make things and play games. Hello everyone, Wylock here, welcome back, we've done it. Welcome to part 10, the finale of the Tomb of Horrors build. We have made it to the end. Today, we will build Isirerak's actual tomb, then I will lay out the entire dungeon in all its glory, without compromise, 100%. So without any ado, let's dive into our hobby and start crafting. And remember that our sponsor is Heroes Horde for you 3D printers out there. Excellent selection, including all True Tiles lines. Room 33, the Crypt of Isirerak the Demi-Lich. Beyond the door is a smallish rectangular chamber, and as you finish doing some stuff, the floor begins to tremble. Long story short, there's a trap that causes the floor to rapidly rise toward the ceiling, potentially crushing and killing some of the players. And once the floor has risen, you realize that it's actually a mithril vault, with a door in the center of it and a ring set into that. Now, for the first time ever, I am cheating. This tile does not conform to my standards. The interior play space measures 5 by 2.5 inches, with the walls on the outside. I did this because this room has no adjoining walls, so it's okay, and I wanted max play space for the minis. This is the final showdown, and it so happens to be in a very small room. Anyway, I'm going to do the vault as an insert. So I measured out a rectangle of graphics medium chipboard, a few millimeters shorter in both directions than needed. You'll see why in a sec. And this will be the floor of the mithril vault. This DecoArt Americana gloss silver is fantastic. It is the best metallic silver I've ever seen. One coat coverage, I mean, you can see it here in real time. It is a gorgeous silver. The front and back of the vault I'm going to do in an arched manner. Now, I know that makes no sense since the whole thing was a trap and the roof of the vault, you know, crushed the players against the ceiling. Whatever, I'm taking some artistic license here because I don't just want to make another box. I want to give you something to watch. The trick to making a perfect arch is to draw only one half of it and then trace it twice. So here you can see I'm freehand drawing the arch on one side, and then I'll cut it out, mark it so that I know it's the master copy, and then trace it, flip it over to get a mirror image, and trace it again. And now I have a perfectly symmetric arch. For the main walls, same material, more chipboard. Bending it a little bit, inducing a curve to help with the gluing that's about to happen. And I did use hot glue to set these because I love using hot glue wherever possible in the interest of speed. Now those end joints are a little bit rough, so here is some food box grade cardstock. It's much thinner, it has a negligible thickness, so I trace this on, cut it out, and hot glue it onto the short ends. This covers up those ugly seams. Likewise for the roof line, I'm going to use some white glue so that it won't bulge out like hot glue, and take just a wooden dowel or a kebab skewer, cut it to length, and set it in there. It's unintentional, but I'm realizing this kind of makes for good elven architecture, so I'm going to remember how this turned out for future projects. Skulls. This is an evil vault thing, so gotta have a skull. Found a skull from the GW Skulls kit, mounted it on the corner. Also got these picks. They have a spiked end, so I cut some of those. And oh, this is a deep cut, kids. Who remembers the Gothic buildings from like 2 or maybe 3 years ago? Well, I was looking through my bin of leftovers and I found the window cutouts that I had saved. Now that is proof positive that you should never throw anything away. This is a perfect door. The whole thing gets painted up with that beautiful silver paint, and then I just found a cool looking ornate bead to hot glue to the center of the door. Off camera, I did attempt to do some recess shading and I tried some other stuff. I didn't like any result as good as I liked the plain old silver with nothing else to it. So that's what you see here, and that's what I'm going with. Mithril Vault. Inside, there is a low, dust-covered bench near the back wall of the vault. On and around it are an abundance of items. Resting on one end of it is a human skull. Let's take a look at the artwork from the original printing of the module. Okay, so there's the skull. That's the skull of a Sirurak. It's got the rubies in the eye sockets and those gemstone teeth. And how about the artwork from the 5th edition Tales of the Yawning Portal? Yeah, very similar, but as far as the overall look of the room, I have a lot more to go on here. I'm going to attempt to sort of recreate the spirit of this artwork. The bench appears to be wood, and I thought I'd take a little different approach than my usual popsicle sticks with chisel. I'm going to try XPS foam. I just cut a hunk of it, and then with a wire brush, texturize it to put in the wood grain. I must admit, it is nice seeing it more properly to scale, and it's certainly easier to pull off. I don't know about the final look, we'll see. Then I've got some thin cardstock. It's basically paper. It's 30-pound cardstock, but it might as well be a heavy printer paper. Cut some strips and then score them and fold them lengthwise and glued them on with white glue. This is like a metal banding. Painting, keeping it simple, solid base coat of a dark umber, then a dry brush with a cinnamon type of brown. For better or worse, I try to avoid washes wherever I can, so that's it. The banding on all the corners gets a simple gray gunmetal, and then a shading with Agrax Earthshade. Now for a Sirurak's skull itself. Again, back to the GW Skulls collection. I found a good one that appears to be human-like and of a proper scale to my other 28mm miniatures. Quick drilling of the hole and super glue a paper clip to make this easier to paint, make a little temporary handle on it. Painting is easy, it's a skeleton bone cream color, and then a wash with Agrax Earthshade, and finally with an insane detail brush, getting some red into the eyes to illustrate the ruby gemstones. Since the bench is foam, I can just impale this down in there, so I cut a length of it, stuck it in, and a little bit of white glue, good to go. A Sirurak skull done. Now what else do we have? There's some potions on there next to it. So we'll back to my usual rainbow beads with Toho seed beads for the stoppers, connecting them together with super glue. Made just a few of those, clustered them together on the bench along with the skull, and now it's time to attach the bench to the floor for good. It's all starting to come together now. I'm liking it. This is a leftover Misericordia bit from a Warhammer 40k Adeptus Custodes model. As you can see, I have already painted it, mounted it on a paper clip, and it too can impale directly into the foam. Although the floor just looks a little bit unfinished, so I tried to weather it up with a simple black wash. Then, for the copious amounts of gold and treasure around, I started with a blob of hot glue to create the bulk of the pile of the coins. And it's a treasure pile. Oh, you know what that means. Yes! Bejeweling. And it's appropriate, too. It's my lucky day. Anyways, bejeweling, and I've got some gold glitter here that I wanted to try. It's a big, chunky glitter. Kind of looks like coins. A little bit large, but I figured I'd try it. Also, once again, raiding my costume jewelry bin. Looking for things that would pass as treasures. And here it is at the I think I'm done point. Now, I've talked about this before. When you think you're done, you're really not. And something about this just isn't tied together for me. I narrowed it down to a few things, and here's what I did. First of all, the skull is tiny, and it is technically the final boss. I hate to use that word, but it's the big bad of the dungeon. Technically, it's to scale, but I would just like it to be more prominent. And I really want to use real gemstones in the eyes. So I have this Halloween bead. I don't remember where it came from. It's way too big, but again, I'm going to take some artistic license. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That gold glitter is actually multicolored depending on what angle you're looking at it, so it doesn't come off as gold coins. It's really cool looking, but I just don't want to use it here. So I covered that with white glue and then hit it with a genuine, very fine gold glitter. This stuff's expensive, so I hoard it. This larger replacement skull gets the exact same paint job as before. For the eyes, oh boy. If I've thought I had done detail work before, these are, I think, 2mm flatback gemstones. And if I tear open this package, the plastic is going to spring and these are going to rain all over the room and I'll never find them again. So I had to extract them from the package with a surgical precision. I had to really think about it. Yes, and there they are, the two that will be used as the eyes, and you can see how big they are relative to my tweezers and fingernails. They are set into the eye sockets with simple white glue. Tearing out the old skull and putting in the new one, this can be seen from 3 feet away. The eyes glint very nicely, and we'll get a beautiful close-up of this in just a minute. Going to the floor. Again, I know it's mithril, but maybe the floor isn't. Again, artistic license. Painted it with a dark gray, and then with a light gray, painted on some cobblestone, flagstone, I don't know what it's called. It's like this, some random stone blocks. And then once that's dry, the same plain old 10-to-1 black paint wash. Played around with it, tried some texturing, ended up dabbing it, and that's just going to be much more interesting to look at. So, let's look at it. Yes! So you can see the shell fits around that floor insert, and the shell itself is sized exactly so that it fits in the tile. And there's room for all the miniatures as normal. Perfect. So let's go ahead and take the shell off, take a look at what's inside. Shazam, folks. There it is. Let's get another look at the inspirational image from the 5th edition Tales of the Yawning Portal, and look at them side by side. Honestly, I think I nailed it. I think this is pretty awesome. Yes, you can see some bits of glue. Remember, my camera is zoomed in all the way. You are seeing sins that you would never see with the human eye at the table. This thing truly came out awesomely. I could not be happier with a Sierra X Final Vault. And now, the entire Tomb of Horrors. Had a little problem. The footprint of the entire dungeon is almost 7 feet by almost 9 feet. Too big for a table. I want it to be on a surface that's got a single neutral color, so wood grain doesn't work, floors don't work, carpet the pieces won't stay together correctly, nor will they on a sheet. Eventually I came to the conclusion that I need to paint my garage floor. So I did. I painted my garage floor for this project. A decision that will age horribly, as you can already see where the other car normally sits and the tires have already peeled up some of the paint. But in front of the other car, for this one shining moment, it is fresh and pure and exactly what I need. As I was setting it up, it was sort of like a construction zone with the floodlights. My wife walked out at one point and took this picture. A lot of you had a little bit of fun with that on Facebook. I was particularly amused at one comment that said, "This perfectly encapsulates both victory and defeat at the same time." But I was not defeated. I was just tired. It took an hour and 10 minutes to set this up in my 90-degree high humidity garage. And when it was done, a few quick notes about the practical reality of a project like this. Organization is key. There's almost 100 tiles, and all of them are labeled on the underside. Some of these are multiple tiles broken into one, like hallway 15 for example, so number X of Y also goes on the back. If you're going to undertake a project like this, make sure you do that as you go. Don't leave it for later. Hey, here's a question for you. Have you ever used so much small scatter terrain in one sitting that you literally needed a broom to sweep it all up afterwards? I have. And let this be a testament to the durability of my construction methods. Look at all those chipboard clip-ons. Perfectly fine. Not a one was damaged in this cleanup effort. Nice. And now a trigger warning for those of you who are aroused by Tetris. For now, there are 2 large cardboard boxes that all of this fits into, but I'll eventually move it over to one big plastic tote. Smart way to pack is the big stuff first, the things that are your constraints. So the largest tiles go in first, and also anything that's going to go the full length or width of the box, that should also go in first. I did permanently hot glue some of the scatter terrain to the tiles, the stuff that's flat and unlikely to be knocked off, but those tiles I try and put towards the top so that there's less weight on them. After all, really the only reason for this thing's existence is to take to conventions and set up on display. I don't intend to ever actually run it. So there you have it, the most infamous module of all time rendered without compromise. Hey, if you're interested in good Dungeons & Dragons modules, why not check out my Etsy store? I've published 3 of them and they're real cheap. I'm also on Patreon, but most importantly, come find us on Facebook, the Tabletop Crafters Guild, over 30,000 members, making great stuff for their tabletop gaming. Okay, now I'm not reading from a script, so this will be a little disjointed, just sort of stream of consciousness. I know it's annoying to listen to that kind of thing, but thank you to everyone for the support getting through this project. It's not like it was a hardship for me or anything. It was an epic undertaking. What I'm really referring to is the hiatus I took toward the end of last year. Thank you for the words of encouragement. My hope is that this series of 10 videos stands as a legacy forever, as a love letter from me to a hobby that has treated me so greatly and keeps swinging me perpetual ad revenue. Man, I feel good. For some reason, though, it just doesn't quite feel like the end of a journey. Why is that? I'm Wylock. See you next time. Make things and play games.